OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
It's 7:30. You're welcome along to Tuesday's OTB AM. We're going to be with you between now and 10 o'clock this morning. And coming up, we're going to be chatting to Nicola Tallant of the Sunday World to chat about Tyson Fury and the refusal to let him into the United States last week. We're also going to be joined by Andy Mitten to talk about Manchester United and a fairly wild few days at the club over the weekend. And we will have Simon Cox of Republic of Ireland fame with us a little bit later on to bask in the warm glow of the tournament that is Euro 2012. 10 years this week since that famous / infamous Spain game is 10 years ago this week, isn't it? That's the anniversary. It all blends into one. Dan McDonnell of the Irish Independent is with us in studio. Dan, how excited are you to get the opportunity to reflect on Euro 2012?
It's the Italy game. It is the Italy game.
It's the Italy game. Okay.
It is. It's funny how it's all a blur to a lot of people. I mean, it might even be the case for people who are there because the Spain game. Because Ireland were in Poland last week in Łódź, and the day of the 1-1 draw with Ukraine was the anniversary of the Spain match. So that would have been something that would have been sort of covered around that game. So James McLean was the only player who was present in both squads. Keith Andrews was obviously a squad member in 2012 and is there as an assistant manager now. But yeah, that was back in Poland. It did sort of, I mean, I'm sure there's people sort of listening or watching who were there because a lot of people were there. A lot of Irish people were there because that was like a generational event for a lot of people who probably, might have been their first time to go to a major tournament as an adult in a lot of cases, if they couldn't have met 2002. So you were talking like this 18-year gap. Like being in Poland last week, it did sort of bring it back. There was a tram to the stadium, sort of a shopping complex nearby the stadium you're walking through, and just that feeling of, I don't know, that sort of deadened feeling that seemed to exist for a large part of that tournament. It was something that brought back. I mean, I do like Poland, but I've been there quite a lot. If you cover football, the Irish football team, you will go to Poland a lot. This is something that you need to come to terms with the realisation that you will. I think I'm definitely.
You say that as if it's the country's fault rather than the Republic of Ireland football team's fault.
It's the FAI's like permanent love affair with Poland. I genuinely, I think I might have been there 12 or 13 times at this stage through various reasons, and I just wonder if 2012 has turned me off because it's a beautiful country, great place and stuff, but it's sort of just brings flashbacks, flashbacks to that point in time. Which leaves mixed memories. But I suppose a lot of people that were there, everyone will have their own stories. It's like I think Colin put through a clip, of Keith Andrews talking about it there at one stage, and he described it as from the players' point of view of like walking out into a stag do every day, and that's a line I actually use all the time about that tournament. It was like this big sort of whatever Irish wise maybe 10-day to 2-week long stag party. So like any stag party, everyone has their own story. Yeah. People have a shared experience, but people will have their own memories. Some good, some bad, many forgotten, I'd say.
Is that just part of your frustration that there was a massive stag going on and you just weren't invited? You had to be a consummate professional.
Well, I mean, I'd like to say I was a consummate professional. I mean, generally was, but it's more so like arriving at a stag party late when you've been working that day. So you sort of like you arrive to the stag late. You might be introduced to people you don't remember their names, and you have a couple, because we actually got out to the press would have been quite a long trip, because prior to that there'd been a training camp in Montecatini in Italy, which was back to like sort of Trapp's spiritual home basically. And that was a week or so, and then on to Hungary, and then arrived to Sopot quite early, and actually the couple of days building up to the tournament, it was quite a good vibe because you have that sort of giddy enthusiasm and maybe that whole delusion maybe of thinking, maybe this could go quite well. Ireland's in a major tournament. This could be a great experience to cover this and these big games coming up. And then naturally, like more and more people started to arrive. So suddenly became a little bit more full around the place. And then the first game happened and it was like the crash,
I think that's a perfect teaser of a note to leave it on, and then the crash. We will be coming back to this a little bit later on in the show. If you were at the stag party in 2012, we'd love to hear from you. You can tweet us at Off The Ball. You can comment on our YouTube stream as well if that's where you're watching us this morning. Just to tell you what's coming up, Nicola Tallant is going to be on the line with us in about 15 minutes time to chat through the latest in the Tyson Fury situation. The Euro 2012 rewind then is coming your way at 8:10. The sports news with Carl Milani at 8:30, and then Andy Mitten is going to join us at 10:50, and then a bit more golf after 9 o'clock before we bring you Tommy Welsh, who was on last night's show reflecting on the weekend's hurling. OTB AM is brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. It is 7:35, and Dan, we wanted to go through a couple of League of Ireland tidbits over the next little while, I guess, before we get into your breakthrough stars of the season, which is one of the things we wanted to do. Just got to talk about Rovers Bows this Friday. Yeah, it's a sort of a strange old time in the League of Ireland. It's actually a time of the year I quite enjoy. That a lot of the other football stops. Obviously, you know, for a lot of people are like they're in the sort of season is over mode. But the League of Ireland being a summer campaign, it's sort of it's always a little bit it comes back out of the summer break, and it's always a little bit overshadowed by the international break naturally and like the hangover from that. But now you have this sort of run over the next sort of month, 5 weeks or so, and even particularly with, like, I know it's a slight side story, but like, even the fact that GEA is finishing so early this year, and the calendar is, like, you know, it's not as dense as it would be, so like a lot of counties will obviously be gone and will have lost interest. The European runs could coincide perfectly. Well, that's what I'm saying. Zone, there's a little sweet spot there in July where if one of the clubs, and it's more likely to be Shamrock Rovers just because of the nature of the competition they're in, they get a couple of cracks at it. But they actually do have an opportunity this year to sort of absorb a fair amount of interest and attention if they can get it right. And there's also 3 clubs in the Conference League as well. So it's been like the fact that Rovers Bows, again, it's sold out 4 days in advance. It's sort of been in keeping with the story of the season, and that crowds have been very good generally this year. I'm not sure if there's I don't think it's necessarily reflected in like more discussion around the place or more media coverage and stuff. I think that's been pretty solid and stable as it has been over the last couple of seasons. But there's no doubt that probably post COVID or whatever, like, more people are going, and I think individually clubs are doing more work to sort of hold their fan base. And I think sometimes, like, you always talk about the League of Ireland sometimes in very broad terms of, you know, how can we get more people interested, but almost like the first step to that, really more than anything, is getting your own sort of casual fan base tied down and becoming more regular. And I think that's what you're seeing happen, and probably particularly in Dublin, where you have a situation now in Tallaght and the Shamrock Rovers ground where, I mean, when they would have been doing maybe the third stand there, there might have been some people who might have thought, well, you know, the average attendance here is whatever, you know, 3,000-4,000. Why do they almost need this third stand, or is this essential? And now you're looking at a situation where it is sort of a build it and they will come type thing, where they're sort of regularly getting more than 7,000 people in Tallaght, and they're in the process of actually doing the fourth stand behind the goal, which is going to, they're starting construction work on that now, which is going to bring the capacity towards 10,000. And now I'm looking at this going, yeah, this is justifiable. Yeah. Whereas, you know, 6-7 years ago there was a couple of thousand people going to their games, so it's mad. But yeah, Rovers Bows is sold out like 3-4 days in advance. That's like 7,500 people going, and there's been definitely like a spectating revival of sorts in Dublin. Or maybe is it a revival, or is it more an overdue tapping into the population that's there? Yeah. You know, because in my time maybe covering the league, certainly Dublin has been, you'd often go around the country to say Cork or Dundalk and Sligo at times and talk about, isn't it great the community are involved in this, and actually maybe just belatedly some of the clubs in Dublin are doing that. But, and because a lot of the media are based in Dublin, maybe there's more positivity about the league this year because you're actually seeing and hearing a lot more people going to games, you know, which is a big point, which is pretty important. Yeah, you know? Well, absolutely. Were you worried a couple of weeks ago that this title race is going to just run away from the neutral entirely, and is it back on song again? Yeah, I think this is the thing. So like Dundalk beat Shamrock Rovers on Friday. I think it was mentioned yesterday, all right, that like they're 5 points behind now with a game in hand. But it's still like, yeah, like there's still this probably niggling sense that Shamrock Rovers are going to probably
win the league and probably run away from it unless Europe becomes such a distraction for them that it opens the door for someone else. But like, that certainly has been the issue with the last couple of seasons. I mean, Shamrock Rovers have won the league but probably haven't got a huge amount of external sort of love or not being part of like big team of the year discussions or anything like that, because there's probably a sense that it's been quite comfortable for them in the league. They haven't really been pushed. They haven't really faced an outstanding challenger. I mean, you had that excellent Dundalk team, which the Stephen started with Stephen Kenny's era and was the dominant team, and basically imploded through just bad sort of decisions off the pitch, and almost Shamrock Rovers were coming along to probably try and knock Dundalk off their perch, but then the Dundalk took themselves off the perch before anyone could get there. They toppled themselves, and so Shamrock Rovers have taken the crown, and now bizarrely enough it's possible that their challenger this year is going to be Dundalk again, because they've got Stephen O'Donnell in, and in a very short space of time he's probably built a sort of environment that may look like it might endure and challenge and give us some kind of title race, because certainly the last couple of seasons, and I've even Declan McBennett from RTE has made this point and stuff, when there's criticism around TV coverage, it doesn't help when come October, November, there's no, well, this is the game to win the league, or this is the key match of the season, like you might have had with some of those Cork and Dundalk games in the last decade. Every year there was almost a big pivotal game. You haven't really had that the last couple of years, and certainly it would help. But it looked like Derry City were going to be the team that would challenge. Their form has gone off a cliff since they played Rovers and Tallaght and were very good. And now Dundalk seem to have sort of slipped up the rails, and they might be poised to challenge.
We wanted to go through some of the breakthrough stars of the League of Ireland season so far. So what we've done is, what you've picked out, 5 players.
Picked out 5, yeah. 5.
Born this century.
Yeah, born this century, because I think there's no doubt that the big change with the league in the last couple of years is the age profile. And you have a situation now where I suppose you're always talking about, like, how do you make the league accessible to people? And we now have a situation where I suppose in 5-6 years' time, hopefully, the Irish senior team has players like Nathan Collins and Jason Knight, and the generation that's there at the moment, Troy Parr. I know Gavin Bazunu did play here, but still probably those players that play senior football here are the minority in terms of the senior squad, although there's been a greater increase in traffic. But now, obviously, unless players go to Europe at 16, 17, the top talents will generally play here, and you'll get to see them here maybe for a while before moving on. Now, I'm not sure if these players are all sort of going to go on and play senior international football, but they are all under the age of sort of 22 or under, and 5 big names this year. So will I just run through them?
Yeah, like maybe start with Andy Lyons.
Yeah, so Andy Lyons is probably the like, he's not, to describe him as a breakthrough star is maybe slightly unusual, because he's quite a well-known player with Bows over the last couple of seasons, including, like, he broke into the Ireland 21 squad while at Bows. But he's one this year who has gone from Bows to Shamrock Rovers over the winter. Controversial transfer, but there was probably a lot of Bows fans going, do you know what, like, he's probably a bit, like, he's not as good as he used to be. He's maybe a little bit overrated. I think he was keen to go to the UK, and I'm not sure if he was really getting bites. There would have been compensation issues. I think that if it come to it, though, people from Bows would say there wouldn't have been an issue there. But either way, he went to Shamrock Rovers, and it was almost a sense of, like, it's no great loss to Bows. And he's gone from being a right back with Bows to a left wing back at Shamrock Rovers, and all of a sudden has brought his performances absolutely to another level. And
it's on an attacking level, isn't it?
On an attacking level, yeah. Like, he's scored quite a few goals in the opening sort of third of the season. He had international duty last month. He wasn't involved in Dundalk last week, and I presume it's a carry on from that. But he's been exceptionally good, and probably one of those where, like, Shamrock Rovers are trying to create probably some kind of elite environment out there. And last year they took Danny Mandroyo from Bows to Shamrock Rovers. Again, at Bows there was mixed views around him, and he went to Tallaght and he sort of went to another level, got into an Ireland squad, and in fact was on standby for the Ireland squad last month. And Andy Lyons again is one who's suddenly, he's changed environment, and for whatever reason he seems to have taken flight, and now looks like a really good player who probably who will have proper UK interest now. if it comes to pass. He's definitely one that stood out this year, yeah.
And is Stephen Bradley's decision to stay at the club, do you think, keeping this team a little bit more close-knit? You mentioned the English links were more during his Bowes time, though.
Yeah. Well, it was more. See, he was out of contract at Bowes, and basically it came to the stage where if you're an out of contract player, I think he was desperate to go to England, to be honest. But I'm not sure if there was any real, there was a bit of interest, but not enough to maybe trigger someone. They would have had to do a deal with Bowes, and then to move within one domestic club, there's a smaller amount of money involved, without getting bogged down in sort of compensation things. But it was a little bit of for Rovers, it was a sense of, are they just stockpiling a player here because he's a good local player? But actually, no, they've turned him into, or he has turned out to be, a signing that I think even Rovers players, he's been better than they thought as well. They would sort of tell you that privately. Yeah.
Next up, we've got Dundalk goalkeeper Nathan Shepherd.
Yeah,
a strange path on this man's career.
Yeah, so he's the Welsh under-21 goalkeeper. So Dundalk last season, with all the other stuff that was going on off the park, which contributed to their downfall, they also had dreadful goalkeeping issues, to the point where they had Albanian Italian goalkeeper called Alessio Abibi, who I think through the American ownership and management team, they thought that this guy would be the answer, and he was not the answer, with all due respect to that. He was very confident, good interview, not as good at goalkeeping. And it really cost them big time.
There's a book in the Italian links with Dundalk.
There actually, there definitely is. Someone just needs to motivate themselves to get stuck into it. But so they signed this Welsh under-21 goalkeeper Nathan Shepherd at the start of the year, previously with Brentford B, and he's quite young looking as well. I'm not sure, is he 22 or 21? But he probably looks younger. He sort of has that sort of choir boy look or something. And in his first game or two, he looked a little bit ropey. You could see teams putting corners in on top of him and thinking they might dominate this fella. And actually, since then, his performance levels have been really good. He's been exceptionally good for Dundalk, really. To the point, I think when he joined, he was Welsh under-21 backup keeper, but he's played himself. He's made himself their first choice on the strength of his performances with Dundalk. That Welsh football has this programme which is they're probably a sort of an against the head or a magazine style program, and there's 3 Welsh lads at Dundalk at the start of the season, and they did this 20-minute feature of up with the lads around Dundalk, our Welsh, it's sort of a surreal thing that you get more magazine TV coverage in Wales than there's no equivalent Irish version of this, and they're very interested as to why are so many of Welsh underage internationals playing in this town in Ireland. It's very unusual, but it's actually boosted their profile at home, and Shepherd's been excellent. So he's sort of in their title challenge, which may now exist, he's been a key element of it.
Absolutely. Next up, we've got Sam Curtis at St. Pat's, and in the Indo this morning, David Kelly's just mentioning the links with Feyenoord, which I think have been reported. I think Neil O'Riordan and the Sun had mentioned that, but this is what I'm talking about in terms of the type of player you're going to see in the league now. Sam Curtis is only 16, and probably at another time Sam Curtis would have gone to wherever, some English club by now. He would have gone on his 16th birthday or the summer of his 16th birthday. It's different, but James Abankwah, who played for Pats, broke through last year, would have been slightly older than Curtis is now, but got his move to Udinese, and he's on his way there this summer. Curtis is a right back. He's a defender, but he's been playing right back, having previously been with Shamrock Rovers and played for their second team, I think at the age of 14 and a half, but then made a move to St. Pat's, which was sort of controversial in some ways to people, but Pats have obviously promised him a degree of first team football, and he's had some tough days, there's no doubt. There was one game recently against Shells, he was taken off at half time, he was on a yellow, he was struggling, but he played 72 hours later and was very good, which sort of suggests a degree of character. And this is the point, he's getting exposure to first team men's football at a good level at 16, and it's no surprise now you're hearing about Feyenoord and other European clubs, and you are going to see more of this. You're going to see clubs playing players here at 16, 17, because these are going to be the top ones of that generation. But obviously you need to make this an industry, so sometimes with that, Curtis is clearly good enough to play now, there's nothing tokenistic about it, but obviously you will see clubs will probably be happy to expose players because that's going to increase their value as well too.
because everyone dreams of a sort of a Gavin Bazulu style sale, which has now basically ended up being worth around £3 million to Shamrock Rovers.
Yeah, serious windfall. We'll try and come back to that conversation a little bit later on. But it's really interesting, especially with the Carl Heffernan news yesterday as well about that pathway. Just to finish up on the 5 players, Jack Moylan of Shells is next up.
Yeah, to be quick with Jack Moylan, like he's Damien Duff Shelburne to give them their full title. He was on loan at Wexford from Bows last season. Did well in the first division, but the first division is a little bit out of mind to some degree. And over the winter, turned out for whatever reason he was allowed leave Bows and join Shells. So I think it was a bit of a low profile signing, but some people in the game were saying, no, this is a proper player, look out for him. He's been excellent. He's a sort of a number 10 creative style player. It's his first season in the Premier Division and he's getting better and better all the time, so he's definitely one to look out for.
And then Brandon, well, actually, sorry, just on Jack Moylan, sorry, just before we move on, like, it's very hard to judge it just yet because it's season 1 under Damien Duff, but is your sense that the expectation of Duff to be able to take these younger players and to be able to build them into something better and to, I guess, impart all his wisdom on these players, is that working so far? I appreciate it's very, very hard.
I think it's
to get a sense of.
I think it's going okay. I think it is going okay. I know they lost last week, but prior to the break they'd won I think 4 in a row before they lost to Shamrock Rovers. Duff signed a lot of the same type of player, sort of with that profile, young, on the way up, not necessarily well known within the league, but with a desire to get better. Training sort of full-time hours in football, and maybe budgets dictate some of their recruitment as well, but they're generally a quite focused, hungry team, quite united. You see they're, socially they go on very well and stuff, and I think he's doing well. Right. I think he's doing well. I think it's got a chance of getting better there, yeah.
Good stuff. And then finally we're moving on to Brandon Kavanagh of Derry, who moved from Shamrock Rovers. Yeah,
there's a couple you could have put in here. Brandon Kavanagh, I suppose you need to have some kind of Derry representation. There's probably Brandon Kavanagh and the goalkeeper, Brian Maher, maybe I could have mentioned as well, who's the Ireland 21 goalkeeper. But Kavanagh, again, I suppose you're talking maybe about players people might want to go and watch, and he's again a playmaker type player. He can play in the number 10 or sort of left or right. He was at Shamrock Rovers and he seemed to be out on loan all the time, and Derry just took a chance at him by giving him a sort of a proper sort of long-term contract. He's moved from Dublin to Derry and he's done well. Again, he's someone who, when he broke through at Rovers at 17-18, people thought he was going to be on the conveyor belt of talent that goes away, and it hasn't quite happened. But probably like a sort of in some people's eyes, maybe some like Wes Hoolahan characteristics. Brandon Kavanagh, he's small, he's not the biggest fella, but good to watch, and he's been one of the names this year that's probably his first full season as a sort of a first teamer in the Premier Division, and he's done well. Right, okay, very interesting. So those are your 5, like an arbitrary enough number 5. Yeah, just look out, yeah. There's plenty more as well, and we're going to come back to that conversation if we have time throughout the show, because as I said, there's plenty of reaction to that, and there's kind of wider conversations around pathways. But at 7:53 on this Tuesday morning, you might have seen at the end of last week the news that Tyson Fury was denied entry into the United States after trying to get on a flight from Manchester to New York. The decision was reportedly taken by the US authorities because of his links with Daniel Kinahan. And Nicola Tallant, investigations editor with the Sunday World, is with us on the line to discuss. Nicola, thanks a million for taking the call.
Morning.
So what actually happened last Friday?
Yeah, last Friday evening, very late, I just got a tip-off that Tyson Fury had been denied entry to the US. And, it appeared that he had been in Liverpool that evening, but the fact is he certainly booked a flight for midday from Manchester that Friday, but was told that he wasn't gaining access. He's obviously on the list, the famous US sanctions list. So I suppose that's a big story for Tyson Fury and for his fans. And going forward, if he's banned from the States, the question is, how does that affect his career? I know he said he's retired, but there seems to be, I don't know that much about boxing and that, but boxers seem to constantly retire and get back in the ring. So yeah, he's part of a growing group of people who are finding themselves in serious problems with the States because of the US sanctions on the Kinahan organised crime group.
Had you realised before last Friday that he was on the US sanctions list?
I think they all probably know, as the time goes on, and more and more of them are getting word that they can't enter the country. They probably suspect it. My understanding is that a lot of them are actually booking flights to test the waters, to see whether or not they're going to be given their visas are allowed in, and they aren't necessarily needing to be there for something, but they're just checking out if they're one of the band.
So what happens, or what happened last week? Is it a situation where he manages to make it to the plane and it's at the other side in the States where he's turned away, or is it over here where?
No. He didn't fly.
Right.
They're informed beforehand. I'm not exactly sure how it works in the UK because they do their immigration on the other side. Here in Ireland, we can do immigration clearance on this side, but certainly, they obviously have to have their documents in place before they even board, and it was at that point that he was told he wasn't going to be granted access.
So this banned list consists of roughly 600 people. I guess the vast majority of them, if not all of them, have no real links to crime. I guess this is something of a wake up for them. And then on the other side of things, there's possibly a sense of fear mongering from the US side of things, saying, listen, you do have, albeit tenuous links to a crime boss, you will have to pay some sort of consequence for that.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's been over the years with the Kinahan organised crime and their involvement, so deeply into boxing, there has been stories about people not being able to travel to Vegas for Conor McGregor fights, for things like that, a lot of them being turned back. So there had been a sort of a list which I would consider was more kind of an inner circle, or maybe people closer to the actual crime end of things. But this now seems to have been expanded into boxers and other sports people who were working with Kinahan possibly and his associates, but may not be involved at all in organised crime, but they have found themselves now on this list. Like Tyson Fury, back in 2017 was signed up to the MGM gym at that stage, founded by Daniel Kinahan and Matthew Macklin. And I mean, I think he has been very public about his relationship with Daniel Kinahan. He has backtracked on it since the sanctions were announced, but he did famously, call him out on that video that went viral when he announced that the fight had been organised with Anthony Joshua, and he thanked him for brokering that. That was a turning point in a way when it came to Daniel Kinahan's ongoing involvement in MTK, which they had at least insisted he had completely nothing to do with, and he'd sold out of it. Him and Macklin were, it's said to have sold it completely in 2016. It was at that point that Daniel Kinahan moved out to Dubai. But if you look at the timeline, at the exact same time, MTK removes itself from Europe and centres itself in Dubai as well. So the suspicions were always there. MTK were very, very adamant that Kinahan had nothing to do with it. But I think when Tyson Fury called him out as a fixer, that muddied the waters a lot. Now, again, the regulations within the boxing seem to be that you can work with a boxer, without having to be licensed. And none of that has been fixed. That all still seems to remain very, very liquid, all that situation. I think boxing will have to start to, clean up its regulations and clean itself up. Look, Kinahan is toxic now from the point of view of organised crime and from the point of view of boxing. The three Kinahans, the father and the two sons, are essentially hunted at the moment. There's a $5 million bounty on each of their heads for information to bring them to justice in the US, and anybody connected to them is feeling the ripple effect of that.
You mentioned there earlier that maybe Tyson Fury doesn't get back in the ring and he may not necessarily need to go to the States to fight, but you'd imagine, regardless of whether it's in-ring work or out of the ring work, the United States is an unbelievably lucrative market to somebody like Tyson Fury. But then you've got 600 people on a list, and you'd imagine that a huge amount of them will be put out, to say the very least, about their inability to travel to the United States. So how does their status change over the next little while? Is it essentially when Daniel Kinahan comes to justice that list will be reassessed, or can the United States actually address this on a case-by-case basis?
I honestly don't know how they organise that. I mean, it's always been that in the States, if you have a criminal offence, you can't enter, and ordinary people also with criminal convictions can be banned from travelling there. So I don't believe they have a timeline for that. I don't think they have a particular, it's not like getting penalty points that you eventually kind of work your way out of it. So, it's not clear exactly what the States are going to do or exactly where those 600 people would be in, say, for example, 10 years' time, whether it's a lifelong ban or not. That information isn't coming to us, certainly not freely as of yet. I'm sure the individuals concerned can try and book a flight in another year, or maybe another 6 months to see how they get on. High-profile guy like Tyson Fury, a lot of those people on that list and associates of Daniel Kinahan, we wouldn't be talking about here, and nobody would know who they are, but they remain on the list. But somebody high profile like Tyson Fury, any travel he does is kind of followed either by the media or through his own social media. So he's not somebody that's going to be able to slip in there unnoticed. But I genuinely don't know whether or not it's a never-ending ban or if that ban lifts when the Kinahan organisation is, as it's seen by law enforcement, removed off the map.
When it comes to MTK as a whole, or the former MTK, there's been reports recently that the investigations are continuing into a company that is, to all of the intents and purposes, a folded company at this point. Can you tell us a little bit about what's actually going on there?
Well, MTK weren't named in the sanctions. They weren't one of the companies that was named. There was 7 individuals and a number of companies named. One of them was a boxing company, but it wasn't MTK. But nonetheless, they folded within a week of those sanctions. And, I think they're inextricable links to Daniel Kinahan, and has to be seen as part of the reason for that. The money laundering, the wider money laundering investigation, this is the way it is at the moment. The Kinahan organisation has been identified not only now by Irish law enforcement and by Europol, it's been named in a number of Europol reports over the past few years, but it's been recognised now by the US as being a trans-global organised crime network. And those individuals, the 3 Kinahans and their 4 associates, have been named and are on, they've been publicly named by the States. So their future is pretty clear. They are wanted. But when it comes to the companies around them, my understanding is that further sanctions will be coming. And this is a new form of policing. So I don't really have anything to lean back on in this, because it does appear to be a blueprint for policing of these gangs who become so massive that they're seen as trans-global, as opposed to just organised crime gangs. And the idea behind it is for the continents to work together. I mean, Australia is also working with the US, with the Irish, and with Europol, and for them to work together, and I suppose to try and suffocate the oxygen supply to the grouping. A number of years ago, you saw Joaquim El Chapo Guzman he was eventually caught after many years and brought to the US, where he was jailed for the rest of his life. But in the background were his sons, who are now running the Sinaloa cartel. And, they're still very significant players. And the money was all left behind, I suppose, in Mexico. In this case, what the policing plan is trying to do is to bring in the heads of the organisation, but to suffocate the organisation that remains, so that it cannot continue running its drugs and weapons shipments. So they're trying to basically take away the money supply. Now, the money is all really where the power comes from. They can get sanctioned in certain territories across the world with that money. When Kinahan Sr., certainly, who does have convictions, Christy Kinahan Sr. has a conviction for heroin trafficking here in Ireland. He has convictions for money laundering across Europe. He's been in jail in Belgium, in Spain, etc. but he was still welcomed into the US. As we see from the sanctions, he was running a very successful aviation company, and he was attending events publicly, etc. So, the United Arab Emirates will say that they only deal with people without convictions, but there's a clear example of somebody who was welcomed in with a string of convictions and a clear background in organised crime, but who came with enough money to set up companies there, employ Emiratis, and he was able to move and mingle within both society and the business community there. So, you got money and you can go places and you can stay places and you can gain sanctuary. But without that, it's taking another level of power away from these cartels.
Nicola, is there any sense on, you mentioned, our own obviously referenced MTK, but then Pro Bellum as well as the other sort of sports promotion company that's had to sort of distance itself in some degree from Daniel Kinahan. But is there any sense where they stand at the moment now? Because obviously they're still actively sort of pushing events and involved in various events, but presumably they're coming under some degree of scrutiny there.
They certainly have come under a lot of scrutiny and have denied it vociferously, have employed a PR company and a law firm in order to salvage their reputation and try and shut down any discussion about them. But not talking specifically about Pro Bellum, but what I can say is that in the years leading up to the sanctions, my understanding is that a lot of the Kinahan money was spread about a bit more than it previously had been. And there was attempts by them to widen the net in case the law enforcement came after the finances. So there are still a lot of companies that are out there that are running and that are attempting to wash the funds and obviously put it back into the pockets of the leaders of the organisation who are under so much pressure now. You have to remember that the Kinahan Organised Crime Group is working like a massive big business conglomerate. It has huge expenses in wages every month. There's a lot of people that have to be paid, that have to be kept happy. Even within the prison system, there are people that need to be kept on a wage. And, keeping that up, you need to bring in a lot of money to fund those pay slips, basically. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that they're paying out at least $1 million a month in wages to various people across the world. And that will be where the real pressure is for them, because, there's $5 million per head in money for information regarding them that'll bring them in. And they need to keep everybody happy. And they're in a very, very bad and precarious situation at the moment. But I think that we'll see, as the months go on and possibly into next year, you'll see the effects of all this maybe either shutting down, or you'll see other businesses go to the wall as well. But again, I'm not talking about Pro Bellum there. Pro Bellum have distanced themselves for the moment. And while they have obviously lost certain contracts, they're continuing the business at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Just kind of on that point then, I know this is kind of more maybe the intricacies of the boxing world and what they might do next, but like there was...
God, don't ask me about that.
I guess we can kind of make this kind of like a wider conversation. Just the point I was going to make was around the reports recently that Sky Sports asked their fighters to sign a document to confirm that they've no ties to companies previously linked to Daniel Kinahan. So a letter was circulated, basically a one-page code of ethics from Sky Sports, and it required each participant to deny working in any capacity with promotional outfit Pro Bellum or the now defunct managerial conglomerate MTK Global, I should say, was the letter was obtained by boxingscene.com, just to give them the proper credit there. So that would suggest to me that maybe there are actual active efforts in order to prevent this stuff happening within the boxing game, as opposed to a sort of, work away behind the scenes and we'll react accordingly and try and wash our hands of it after the fact.
Yeah, but Sky would maybe need to go back a little bit further than that, because for me, the most obvious connection there is the fact that Matthew Macklin founded MGM with Daniel Kinahan in 2012, that company went on, we were told, to be sold, but it became MTK. And the US sanctions, if you look at what has been said now very publicly and on the record about the Kinahan organisation, it's not that they set up in 2016. It's that they were fully operational in Europe for the last 2 decades. And, Daniel Kinahan has been clearly placed at the very top of that organisation. So to me, that is the most obvious connection that there is. And yet by not going back that little bit further, they're clearly, ignoring that fact.
Can I just ask, lastly, Nicola, you mentioned earlier on that there might be further sanctions incoming for the cartel and maybe those linked with it. What will those sanctions actually look like?
The same as what we've already seen, that, companies may be named and individuals may be named who are either wanted by law enforcement or with those companies. If anybody operates with them, if anybody does business with them, they end up either with huge fines or before the courts in the US. They're pretty powerful. I think you can see with the sanctions on Russia and the oligarchs, they're not something that change everything overnight. They will slowly deplete the power and the financial prowess of companies or individuals. But I think they're pretty damning, those sanctions. And, the investigation into the Kinahan organised crime group is the biggest and most transglobal that any organisation in Europe has ever seen. I think there's only been 1 or 2 Bosnian cartels that have been named before by the US. The US have enough troubles themselves with drugs. Their borders are being saturated with everything coming in over from Mexico, and they have a huge problem with drug-related deaths as in DEATHS in the country. They have a huge problem with drugs and weapons and gangs themselves. But for them to come on board to fight an outside gang, a European gang, it just shows the enormity of the Kinahan organisation and, the power of policing working together.
Sorry, Nicola, it's actually just struck me, just one last question that we haven't had you on, I think, since the Taylor-Serrano fight, after which there was plenty of talk around potentially a homecoming fight for Katie Taylor, and some questions regarding the security threat being diminished somewhat in Ireland, and that the Gardaí and security forces here are pretty happy, or compared to the past, more happy to have a big bout take place in Ireland. What's your read on all that, and in how the authorities view a boxing event taking place in Ireland this year?
I think it would certainly depend on who it was that was fighting. Katie Taylor got no links to the Kinahan organisation, and has a very clean record, is one of the sporting heroes of Ireland, and I've no doubt that a competition could be put on with security in regard to that. But I do think that there could be other boxers that maybe the security risk threat might be higher. The Kinahan-Hutch feud has absolutely been depleted, and thankfully there haven't been murders in quite some time. But the underlying issues that remain between those two gangs are still there. And I don't think that the Gardaí have laid down their own weapons when it comes to it. The threat is ongoing of that feud reigniting. And despite the fact that there's many people in prison who were prepared to take part in it, there's still very many people on the outside, and it would be naive to think that, nothing could happen again. Of course it could. Those feuds really are constantly ongoing. The Kinahan organisation have more problems really than their rows with former colleagues here on the ground in Ireland. But nonetheless, I think that there is a saying about the sting of a dying wasp, and I don't think that the Gardaí here, with the success they've had, would be sitting back if a boxing event was being planned that possibly could reignite any of that. rivalries, I don't think they'd be sitting back and hoping for the best. I think very much so they'd be engaging on that. But I wouldn't think that a Katie Taylor fight would hold anything like those same risks, or any risks possibly. You know, she has no connections to it, and I think her sport is her way of sport is a very different thing. She is a proper sporting national hero, and there's been no suggestion that she's been funded by anything untoward.
Nicola, great stuff. Thanks a million for joining us this morning.
Okay, thank you.
Cheers. Nicola Tallant is Investigations Editor with the Sunday World. It is 8:15. You're with us here on OTB AM, which is brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. Now up next, we're going on a journey to that fateful few weeks at Euro 2012. 10 years old this month, you'll be delighted to know. We'll be joined on the line by former Republic of Ireland striker Simon Cox, who played in that tournament for Giovanni Trapattoni's side. But before that, here's Limerick's Gerard Hegarty with Joe on Off the Ball last night, talking about that goal in the recent Munster final. Have a look.
So tell me this, Munster final, you score yet another outstanding goal in your lengthy catalogue. Do you stroll into school the next day? People, come on. What, everyone, applaud me. Yeah. You're the main man walking down the hallways, high-fiving everyone.
No, well, we were actually finished there. We were on some holidays. So we finished up on the Friday. We finished up on the Friday just before the Munster finals. So
nuisance. You didn't get the acclaim.
No, I didn't. I didn't get to go into school on the Monday morning. I was resting and recovering on the Monday morning, as you can imagine. But look, it was one of the sweeter ones.
It's beautiful. So you're going to do the GA thing here and be like, look, you know, and
no. It was. Look, it was definitely the best goal I've ever scored. I'd be surprised, but hopeful if I ever score a better one than that. I'm not sure if I will, but to score in a Munster final in a packed Thurles, you know, Limerick and Clare, there's a massive rivalry going on through the years. Conditions were tough on the day, so it was a special one for sure. I'm not taking away from it at all. I'm sure I'll be reminded of it forever when in years to come, you know.
What a roar. It must have felt like the whole place erupted.
It did. And I normally don't go too mad. I've been lucky enough to score a couple of goals over the last number of years. I don't go too mad. I kind of give at Dubai, a few of my friends kind of give me a little slag for the little finger wag that I normally do, but I kind of found myself just jumping up into the air as well. I got caught up in the emotion of it all because it was such an incredible atmosphere, especially at the start of the game and the parade and stuff like that. So look, it's great. It's a great moment to think back on, but hopefully there's more to come soon.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
This is OTB Sports Radio.
I was looking at Love Island there last night. There was a huge shock. There's someone leaving the villa tomorrow night. But the thing is, you don't want to be leaving the villa here in Thurles today. Whoever stays in the championship today has a real chance.
Well, Tommy, I don't know if we should be joining the villa or should be doing maybe the commentary for Love Island, but that's probably the best reference I've heard now on radio in a long time.
I don't have the six-pack to join it, so I'll work on it this winter maybe.
Off the Ball, Saturdays from 1 on OTB Sports Radio. Listen live on the OTB Sports app.
Marginal gains? XG? Top speed? Recovery? What's it all about? Want to improve but don't know where to start? With more data than ever now available, OTB Sports have teamed up with Whoop to cut through the noise and help you raise your game, no matter the sport. OTB Sports are delivering the metrics that matter. Meaningful metrics in partnership with Whoop, the personalised digital fitness and health coach that helps you unlock your inner potential. See whoop.com for more. Follow OTB Sports social channels for the best insights and stats this season.
OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
Oh, you know what that sound means? It means the glorious path of nostalgia is in front of us. The most reluctant nostalgia piece potentially ever is Euro 2012 look back. We're going to be joined by Simon Cox of the Republic of Ireland, who played in that squad in just a moment. Dan McDonnell's been with us in studio all morning, just waiting for this moment, waiting for your opportunity to remind yourself.
It was like an alarm call that you had in your head throughout that entire month.
At around this time 10 years ago, the Irish fans had departed. It was a year and 3 days ago, that game against Italy, to be precise. So, where were you today? 3 or 10
I was
years
still
ago?
in the country.
Still in the country.
I was still in the country. So Sopot was the base, and again, like I think most Irish fans were there would remember Sopot. Some people might have flown into Poznan, say directly and stuff. I mean, I always hear the stories of. I think last week I posted a tweet about the Spain anniversary game, and some guy responded to say that the Spanish game was the second game, and he had to leave at half time in that match to begin his overland, I think a flight, and then a sort of a flight, ferry, and then across Europe trip to Poznan for the final game against Italy, which was a complete dead rubber. I remember speaking to people at the time who were flying out for the third game, thinking we won't do the first two. Let's fly out for the third
the
match.
knockout stages.
Yes, and maybe stay on for the knockout stages. So, but I stayed in the country, so I went back to Sopot. So it was a little bit like 28 days later or something, where you arrive back in, because a lot of people had gone home from Poznan, but I had to go back. I think I had one night left in the hotel, and maybe I'd left some stuff there. And you walk through like the town, and it's just like deathly. It's like, oh, that's actually a square, which previously it was just like this massive human bodies, just like, people being chairlifted around the place. I mean, many of them FBI officials. and then you get to the hotel, and there was a package deal that a lot of the Irish media were on. So I walked in, and like sort of the person in reception vaguely recognised you, and it was like, oh yeah, you're back. And I sort of said, yeah. And I was like, I'm the only one here. And you could just see the look of horror, because clearly the deal had maybe included this sense that, an extra night, I think if everyone got through to the knockout, and actually would have triggered like an extension of your night in the hotel. I think I was the only one that went back, so they practically much had an empty hotel that night, and it was just me, who then had one night there, and then I stayed on for the rest of the tournament, and that was that. Yeah,
28 days later,
it was bizarre. Yeah, I think Emma Malone would have stayed on as well, and maybe one or two others, but otherwise it was that sense of the party's over.
You mentioned the Spain game. I mean, how could we ever forget this? You're trying to file at this point, I presume,
well, I mean, sadly it wasn't too hard to file in this game, because there was no sense of like a last minute goal is going to come along and lead to some kind of rewrite. I mean, sadly that game was over from pretty early, really, wasn't it? I mean, that was the thing. It wasn't one for like last minute sort of, or 84th, was it Robbie Brady and Lille was maybe 5 minutes to go, and that's like frantic rewrite, but it's a happy story rewrite. Whereas I think that was the thing about just covering that tournament. I know it's just a media point, but it was why I sort of found that hard going is that from the Croatian game onwards, it was just a lengthy post-mortem. Like every day was almost, well, what went wrong? And then, okay, the Spanish game was a brief flurry of, well, actually, maybe there's a chance, maybe there's a chance. But then that chance was extinguished pretty quickly. And then you had this like drag of a build up to the Italy game, where it's just like, well, how do you put a spin? It's like, oh, wouldn't it be great to get a point? Or, this sort of complete dead rubber vibe. I mean, like Ireland have never played in a dead rubber major tournament match before. It's sort of like it's sort of a surreal thing where it's like, yes, you're in the stadium and this is a big major tournament game, and yes, it's part of the rota, so a lot of people around Europe are watching this game, yet I don't know, it obviously had meaning to people who were involved. I know I might talk about, like, one of the things was the trap didn't actually really rotate and give some of the squad players a game, which just created their misery. Like Stephen Hunt did that sort of amazing column at the end of the tournament, which just summed up the feelings of a lot of the fringe players. But it was just this long, relentless sort of, players didn't want to be talking to us. We probably didn't want to be talking to players, because what can you actually say? Big game against Italy. It's like everyone knew it was a little bit of a charade in some respects. You know, that the party was really over.
Like I wonder, as like time goes by, will Euro 2012 like be used as some sort of informing factor in like being a cultural touchstone of that era? Because like it really is, like if it was a successful tournament, like I think things like the group of debt, which our group became known as, and like the whole sort of trying to rebound out of a recession might have become a much bigger thing that was married to a sporting occasion, which like, I mean, you can't marry the two things together, but it's something that we did pretty successfully when it comes to things like Italia 90 and Euro 88 and Ireland waking out of its slumber and, Jack's Army helping us along that way. I wonder if, Euro 2012 had been a successful venture for Ireland, would it have the same level of adoration? Because, like, that's what we envisaged before Euro 2012. Like, I mean, especially people of a certain age who had 10 years without a major tournament. Their only memories of 2002 is like a television on wheels coming into their classroom.
Yes.
Or people sitting there leaving certain, like, whispering around the exam hall. People like who weren't even alive for Italia 90 but have memories of Italia 90 because they've watched Reeling in the Years so much. That was the entire experience of Ireland at a tournament. And 2004, 2006 were heartbreaking qualification campaigns. 2010 was the worst of the lot. And then all of a sudden, Estonia get drawn out and we're going to a tournament, baby. It's like the good times are back. And sure, we get Sean St. Ledger's goal, which was a beautiful moment for a period of time. But, like, I mean, compared to that, like, I mean, it just must be one of the highest expectations for a tournament or for any sort of Irish sporting event that just didn't meet the reality.
Oh, I mean, like, and you capture it there. I mean, I suppose everyone sees Irish major tournaments through where they were at that point of their life, right? And I suppose I see Euro 2012, I would have turned 30 that year. So for a lot of my friends, say, we were too young and too broke to go to the World Cup in 2002. Like, we thought about it but just couldn't. Like 19, 19, just didn't have the money to go to Asia. Some people did our age, but not many did. And I remember writing this around the time that, so like the previous tournament experience was 1994 in America, which wouldn't have been cheap, but obviously a lot of Irish people went, but there would have been a lot of Irish people over there. But it was sort of a mainland Europe tournament for the first time since 1990. So for anyone sort of under the age of maybe 40 that was there, there was that real sense building up to it that it was like this. It was like, this is our time, this is our generation's chance to be the adult generation during Italia 90 and USA 94 that you would have grown up and watched them and got a sense this is big.
I can be on Reeling in the Years.
But it's like, yeah, exactly. Like, this is it. Like, everyone, let's watch this and get down to like the Walkins 10 roundabout or something, or like the Polish version of it. And that it became so deflating so quickly. It was that realisation that, no, this is not our moment. And like some people would say that, like, and we're not mentioning the Saipan word again, but that was the end of the age of innocence to some degree, that the discourse around the team became a lot more cynical, a lot more fractured. And so 2012 turned sour very, very quickly. And you have even the Roy Keane, say, representation in studio having a go with the fields of Athenry, and you had this conflict between people going, should we be celebrating this? This is crap, this is dreadful, and this is a great celebration. And of course, from my perspective, you can't get away from the fact that, like, the FAI at the time, like, the whole thing was massively cosmetic. It was like, we're all having a party, yet at home, like, Monaghan United went bust during that tournament. Like, a Premier Division team in our country folded during that, and it was like a footnote because, well, we're over here with the tournament. Like, can we not
no
be
distractions, please.
Can we not be dealing with this here? But it actually, like, sums up the complete dysfunction of the game, and, like, in many respects, that's why the whole Euro 2012 thing was like one big lie. It was like, here we are having a great time over here in Poland, and isn't it brilliant we're here? But actually, like, it was built on, like, foundations made of sand, and everything that's come out subsequently, you hear a lot of the stories, the anecdotal tales around 2012. It was like the extreme version of what was coming down the tracks. And, in a strange way, and I found it massively disappointing at the time, but, like, what course does history take if Ireland did well in that tournament? Do you just prolong that sort of,
possibly,
and 2016 was a much better major tournament experience, and obviously there was that accompanied a lot of mad stuff going on in the background too.
Maybe if there was 24 teams in 2012, Ireland get a different group. It's a bit softer. It's easier to get out of the group.
What way does it run?
Who knows?
What way does it run?
We've got Simon Cox on the line. Simon, you're very welcome to the show. How are you getting on?
Yeah, I'm fine, lads. How are you?
I'm not sure whether to say I'm sorry for bringing this up or what to say. I presume it's not an overly fond memory for you, but it's still playing and starting against Spain in a major tournament.
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's still probably the best memory I've got in football in terms of, being at a major tournament. But ultimately, what transpired throughout the tournament probably isn't something that lives fond in the memory.
Simon, I was just going to say that because you're probably in that small group of players in that squad who didn't get 2016. Like, well, actually, maybe it was quite a number of that squad actually didn't. But it's probably a strange one because the ones who went to 2016, you hear them say, well, it was a better experience than 2012. But obviously, you didn't get that chance. So, like, it was for you, it was still a special point in your history. Like, I presume the reference point you would have with a lot of Ireland supporters who ever talk to you is that Spain game, right? Like, that is the moment that comes up.
Yeah, I think it's probably the biggest question I always get is what was it like playing at that tournament? What was it like playing against teams like Spain and Italy? But ultimately, we weren't there just to take part. And for me, you know, listen, we wanted to do well. Of course we did. But then as soon as you get the group that we got, I mean, it was always going to be difficult. But I just think that if the group would have been the same, which is fine, but had the games been drawn in a different order, then maybe we would have had a little bit more of a chance. You know, yeah, if we had got off to a good start, it might have given us a bit of a bounce. But had we played, say, Italy first, then Croatia, you know, you could have come out with 2 points possibly, and then it would have been hang on to your hats for the Spain game. But you know, it just wasn't to be, and we didn't. Whether we believed we would get out of the group or not, or you know, you're sort of digging into people's mindsets then. But you know, listen, for me, it's still the biggest accomplishment for me in my career.
The group is a problem when it comes to like expectations and trying to get out of it. I mean, it's just the talent you guys were up against. In terms of the stuff that you could control, in terms of the organisation, in terms of logistics, when did you realise that maybe the tournament hadn't been handled perfectly and maybe things could have been done a little bit differently?
Well, we went to Italy to start with. We went to Montecatini, and we flew in there, and then we played a game against Hungary leading up to the tournament. Then we went obviously over to Poland and. Which was great, you know. Travel was fine. Got on the bus to the hotel, checked in. You know, there was obviously a little bit of concern over families getting there and where they stayed and all that sort of stuff. But because they weren't allowed to stay in the same hotel, they had to stay in a different hotel. So it was all of that sort of stuff. That's part and parcel of that, I guess. Then we had the open training session, and I mean, you guys have probably been to loads of tournaments and been around sort of finals and things like that. When you do open training sessions, you put in a stadium and you get supporters that come and watch, and all they want to see really is sort of crossing and finishing. It's just a time for the players who have done a little bit of travelling to stretch your legs, say hello to people. We did possession, and we did like full on training session without any fun. Which was trapped, you know what I mean? Like it was all business and no pleasure really. But we sort of looked at it and we played a possession game with no goals. And if you were a supporter coming to watch that, you'd be thinking like, I've travelled all this way to come watch, you know, not necessarily the open training session, but see the lads enjoy training, you know, get to speak to people and all that sort of stuff. And you know, I've come to watch a possession training session, so that wasn't a great start. And then, but then all of a sudden, you know, you get into it, and you know, the build up to the first game, the Croatia game, it just intensifies, you know, 100-fold really.
You had didn't the players have to sort of barter for a day off around that time, wasn't it, to the build up to that first game? There was like, I seem to vaguely recall at the time an email or something coming through that like training had been called off, and I think it was a product of this like intense build up that you had, right?
Yeah, I can sort of vaguely remember that we'd gone from. So obviously the lads who were playing in the Premier League and the lads who were playing in the Championship at the time obviously finished the season at different times. So the lads who were playing in the Championship, I think, finished first, and then they went over to Dublin and did a certain amount of days prior to everybody else meeting up. Then obviously the Premier League boys came in, and and then they did a few days. Then we went off to Italy. Then we played the game. So you're talking, I don't know, second week of May, probably as soon as the season finishes, talking second week of May all the way through to the final day of the campaign, so final day of the Italy game. You're probably talking 2 days off. But that was probably Trapp's way. It's the Italian way. It's live, breathe, sleep, eat, drink, everything football without any respite. But he sort of got that confused with what the Ireland way is and compared to what the Italian way is. So, it was a little bit tough. But listen, ultimately, you're going into a major tournament, so it's not exactly going to be a walk in the park.
How did Trapp respond to this picture that Dan painted earlier on of the Ireland team being relatively close to this massive stag party?
I don't think it was that, but he's such an experienced manager, and he understands what it takes to be successful. But the difference in cultures is sort of chalk and cheese, really. The Irish way is to be at the tournament, to enjoy the tournament, to try and do well at the tournaments, as well as all the games prior. But the Italian way is to win tournaments, is to win every game that they play in. So there's a difference in sort of mindset in that way. We weren't there on a stag party.
No, to be clear, we weren't suggesting you were on a stag party, but it was more so the environment of the hotel being in the middle of Sopot, which was absolutely chaotic. That's what the reference to. I think like the players were spoken about it previously, that you'd sort of take a walk down the town and it was manic. Like outside the window, you could almost hear the fans outside, as opposed to it being a sort of the team staying in a retreat. You were like right in the middle of the action, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I think put it this way, we were on the beach as well, and it was a nice setting, to be fair. When the families come over, if you had kids at the time, you could sit and play with them on the beach for a little bit. But you'd complain if you were miles away as well, in the middle of nowhere. So I feel like I get the idea of where it was, but you also have to think of, if you do get a day off and you're in the middle of nowhere, then what do you do? So it's a tough one. I think they did okay in that sense. Possibly shouldn't have been right in the middle of town, because all of a sudden, as soon as the build up to the games, to one day before the games, all of a sudden your hotel was manic and raucous in the bar area. So there was little to no sleep happening anyway. So it was fine.
So in that first game, Simon, you come on after 54 minutes for Aidan McGeady, I think it was, in the defeat to Croatia. And I'm not sure, is it the impression you make? Is it how well you're going in training? But what are the discussions like where Trapp comes to you and says, you're starting up front for me against Spain?
Well, I don't know if you go back to the Italian game where we played in Belgium, where Andy Keogh did. He did a really good job on Andrea Pirlo in that game, and we ended up winning the game, I think 2-0 or 2-1. And Trapp sort of had that in his mind, and he wanted to play sort of five across the middle, leave Robbie up top, and sort of try and compact the midfield. It would have been Keith Andrews, Wheelo, Aidan, me, and Duffer, and we would have just tried to compact it as much as we can. But all of a sudden, you got to think of, when you get the ball, what do you do? And it was just a tough day at the office, when you're coming up against those kind of lads, when you're talking Xabi Alonso, Busquets, Silva, Xavi, Iniesta. It's a little bit of a tougher ask to try and keep hold of the ball when you regain it, because you're without the ball for a long period of time.
So your job was to drop back that day, and Robbie Keane was the sole striker.
Yeah, it was to try and nullify the midfield and make sure that we made it difficult to play for the 3 or 4 Spanish lads in there, and then it was trying to hit on the break. But for me, it was, I mean, listen, whether we would have played 4-4-2, whether we would have played, any system possible, I think we needed pace, and between myself and Robbie, we're not the quickest, so it was always going to be a very, very tough ask, and we were always probably going to be sat back defending for most of it, so we needed a bit of pace. And when he come to me and he said, look, we're going to play in the Spain game, are you okay with that, or are you ready for that? And I was like, I'm never going to turn that down. So whether I thought I was the right option or not, I'm never going to say no to a possible start in a European Championships.
I mean, they're European champions, they're world champions at this point. I can't imagine there's any way that you can underrate going up against Alonso, Busquets, Xavi, and then even Ramos and Piqué at the heart of their defence. But having said that, when you get out on that pitch that evening, were they even a level above what you expected?
About 4 or 5 levels above. Right. They just, listen, I think the fact that majority of them all play together, they either play Barcelona or they play at Madrid. Obviously, there's a few that played in England as well, but majority of them know exactly the way they play all the time. So it is possession-based football. It is, exactly who's comfortable. I mean, one thing that I loved about sort of playing against it is that Ramos and Piqué split and Busquets just sat in the middle of them two, and they allowed their fullbacks to just go. They had so much respect and so much belief in Busquets that he was able to sort of just drop and be that sort of focal point of their build-up play, which made it made it very difficult for us, because the rotation of their midfield was just incredible. So, it was a big lesson.
After that, and I guess the situation where you've got like a wind down into Italy, which is essentially a dead rubber game. What are those days like between that Spain and that Italy game?
Well, we got a day off after that one. I think it was just one of those that you need to sort of go see your families, try and get yourself back into some sort of frame of mind where you can have a go at the Italians. And I remember sort of walking around the hotel and going for a coffee, and it was tough. It was tough, and then we obviously had to fly to the new hotel and play the Italian game, but we still felt that there was a possible chance of getting something from that game. It wasn't down tools. It wasn't give up at all. It was let's have a go at this and see how we get on. But it wasn't to be. We weren't good enough on the day.
Sorry, are you taken off at halftime in the Spain game?
Yeah.
So you all of a sudden are the scapegoat for that evening.
Well, I think, I can't remember what the score was at halftime, 2-3, whatever it was. But I mean, obviously, what the decision to be made was that we weren't
1-0.
Was it 1? So, well, I mean, it wasn't that bad then. But yeah, I mean, obviously, what was happening probably wasn't was what was required, and I guess, like I said, I think we needed some pace. So coming off and bringing, I think Doyle came on, did he?
Walters maybe.
Yeah, I mean, it's tried to erase it from my memory. But we needed something, and at 1-0, possibly did we need the chat, or did we try and get back into the game, and then we got hit on the counters and everything else. So maybe that was the case.
Just Simon, I know you actually had quite good time for Trapp and Marco, and sort of they had good time for you clearly, because they gave you some chances in some really big games. But I think the broader public perception outside, I mean, Trapp was given a new contract before the tournament, but it felt like it was very damaging, that exercise, that whole competition. And I think after that, even that autumn, it got a bit testy pretty quickly for Trapp. Was there a sense of it actually felt like the end of something at the end of that competition, if you know what I mean. Like it felt like that was the real turning point for Trapp, that tournament, that it promised so much, but afterwards it was almost like the slow countdown, unfortunately, to his departure.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Dan, I think because we went something like 14 games unbeaten leading up to the tournament. So I think if any manager in international football goes 14 games, it's probably looking like they're going to get a new contract anyway. Just the way it works, 14 games is probably 2 years or so in international games. So if you're not in tournaments, so it's he obviously done well, but you then have the fact that you've got a major tournament, and normally when you look at international managers, they're sort of their success is developed on whether they do well in the tournaments to whether they get new contracts or not. But the fact that he got a new contract before the tournament suggested that he was the man going forward. And then obviously how the tournament unfolded, there was obviously going to be a lot of backlash on one, his contract, and two, the fact that he got one on how the tournament ended.
Simon, our apologies for bringing this all up again this morning, but thanks a million for taking the call and being so generous with your time.
Cheers, guys. Thank you.
Thanks a million. Simon Cox there, striker with the Republic of Ireland in 2012 on the line there. Yeah, like, I mean, that's, you were kind of talking about it a little bit earlier on, Dan, that moment for a whole cohort of people going over is definitely just the sense of chasing O2 to a degree, isn't it? Even from your own perspective, is like, I mean, journalistically, Saipan being like the biggest story in the history of Irish sport, and your first tournament since 2002, you know?
Yeah, well, yeah, not to personalise it, but yeah, it was the first time covering Ireland at a major tournament. It was like, this could be, this could be great. You could be sort of, what's that, writing the first version of history or something, and I mean, really, it wasn't that, as I said, it was like,
it's a version of history.
It's a version of history. Let's look at things that went wrong. But as I said, so much of the, like, in the moment, you get caught up in the day to day. Like, that's one of the things being on the beat. You cover the day to day. It's always the next thing, like what's going to happen. And sometimes it's only with the remove of time, like, you step back and look at the sort of absurdity of aspects of it, and it's sort of probably you sort of knew it in your time, but you were living it, so you were so used to it.
What was the most absurd thing that happened from your experience?
Yes. But it was just like, I mean, like, I don't want to go down this road, but it was probably just the anecdotal tales of, like, sighting of, John Delaney and various people around the place. I don't want to go into it again. We've been there before. Yeah. The stories are well told, but like, some of the clips are still there on YouTube. Like, they haven't been destroyed by history. But like, everyone was caught up in the moment to some degree, and you did have these sightings of various things, and even, like, I think even as well, it's hard to talk about with sort of with Simon on the line, but I think the players were sort of given that day off after that middle game, and I think they just went for it. I think this has been spoken about before. It was like social, so it was like, it was citing that one or two squad members sort of ended up hearing, did you hear such and such was on the beach in the early hours? Like, it's like, did this really happen? It ended up just becoming quite sad in a certain way, but yeah, the absurdity was just, when you think about it, we're in this sort of, you'd always just hear what had happened in the cocktail bar last night or some venue or something. And as I said, I'll stand over the stag party line. The players were not partaking in the stag party, to be clear, but there was that overall sense of loss of complete sort of chaos. And I think people who travelled will all have their stories as well. I think a lot of fans were, and I think maybe for some of them as well, like, I can look at it from a very cynical point of view, that I didn't particularly enjoy it after the first game. Like, I actually hated it, but that was just purely because of my own experience. Like, there could be friend groups listening to this who had the best trip of their life, like travelling across Europe, and it's something for them that they'll always cherish. And the football was disappointing, but it didn't matter because they had a great time. So I think sometimes, like, you can sort of put your own misery on the memory of it, but for a lot of people, I'm sure it was great times too.
It kind of feels like it was a moment for everybody to say Ireland is back, and narrator, Ireland, we're not that.
We all wanted it so badly.
Yeah.
We had it, like as you said, it's true. We had the Reading on the Years montage in our head, of course, before it started.
We were chasing that. David McLean has been in touch to say Poznan was great crack, and I'm sure he wasn't the only one who had a phenomenal time. MOC, who says anyone who booked to see Ireland after playing Croatia, Spain and Italy needs their head examined, was never going to get out of that group, which I think is a fair point. Sean O'Connor goes along with that as well, saying God, it was some shocking group to get. James Carew says someone whistled in the crowd before St Ledger's goal and everyone thought it was offside, so we couldn't even enjoy that.
Yeah, I remember that very clearly actually. Yeah, that's a good memory.
Yeah, I was in a pub, so we didn't hear that whistle, so like that moment was just glorious. That was like, this is what it is to be an Ireland fan who isn't a child. I mean, this is what it's all about. MOC says we were not good enough to be there, only for we got Estonia. We would not have beaten another qualifying team. Definitely getting Estonia was a significant help.
Yeah, well, see, I think the point is, and I think this has been touched on by players before, like that team was past its peak. Like I really think that Ireland team would have done okay at the World Cup in 2010, but it was a tournament too far. And like someone like Simon's a bit different because he was probably in his Irish peak at that time. That was his sweet spot of his Irish career, but a lot of the others, they weren't. And I think that was one of the things. They had that big, long, grueling build-up. I think quite a few of the players had long seasons and were playing through injuries. You saw Seamus Coleman and Yerevan there recently, end of a long season, just wasn't physically at his peak and he struggled. I think there was quite a few Irish players in that boat as well.
Yeah,
in that tournament, that had a big factor in it.
And then finally, Philip Nolan says there was a few young players that came through around that time that should have been brought in, but Trapp stuck with the team that got us there, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, McLean was brought in, but he was 23. Like Seamus Coleman, I think would have been 24 and wasn't brought. You know, James McCarthy, I think had a family reason, but again, he would have been 22. Like they weren't 17, 18.
That squad would have done quite well at the World Cup 2 years previously.
Yeah, that's the whole point. It was definitely the moment had passed, and even the 6 to 9 months from Estonia to the tournament itself was big in terms of where that group were. But
yeah, you'd forget how long a distance there was actually between those two periods.
Forget a lot of things about that time.
Yeah, for sure. We'll park that there. It's 8:51. Andy Mitten is with us on the line. Andy, you weren't at Euro 2012, were you?
No, that was the last tournament I missed. I was in America for a month, so I was watching it from afar. But I was at 16. I was at 20. Just thinking a year ago, I was on the road for 32 days covering that tournament. But no, I wasn't there in 2012. Spain won it, didn't they?
They did. They were pretty damn good that year, to say the least. We're going to turn our attention to Manchester United because even in the off-season, it turns out that Manchester United are a pretty interesting storyline. The big thing over the course of the weekend was Richard Arnold going for pints with the Manchester United fans, and some Manchester United fans, one in particular, recording Richard Arnold and everything that he was saying. Just first of all, when this story broke, Andy, was it a sort of head in the hands moment, being like, oh no, here we go again? Or what was your initial emotion to leaked videos of Richard Arnold chatting to fans?
When I saw it had been leaked, I wasn't convinced that was the right thing to do. I don't think Richard Arnold came out of it too badly, actually. He met the fans. He gave his perspective. Agreed with some of it. I disagreed with other parts of it. But fans are annoyed at the moment. Manchester United were terrible last year. Lost the last 6 away matches. There's been continued protests against the Glazer, more so this year since the results completely turned. But there were also significant protests last year after the announcement of the European Super League. So the mood's on the floor among United fans, and the lack of players so far has frustrated some fans. From Richard Arnold's perspective, he maintains that he's now in charge. He's going to do things his way. Been so many changes at the club, so many staff leaving. Literally every week I get a member of staff ringing me saying, I'm going. And some of them are pushed and some of them jump. And United have lost a lot of good people in the last year. And they've also lost a lot of people. It's probably wise that they've moved on from Manchester United. The reaction to the fans going to the pub was pretty varied among Manchester United fans. ranging from good, this man's a Glazer puppet, he's part of the damage which the owners are doing to Manchester United and have done since that takeover in 2005. And you had a lot of other people saying turning up or intending to turn up at someone's house is well out of order, and a whole gamut of opinions from the fans in between.
I think that if the video hadn't been leaked, it'd be very, very hard to criticise Richard Arnold for what he did. And even the video being leaked, it's not his fault. I think that what would you do if you were in Richard Arnold's situation? I mean, I think he handled it quite well. I mean, I would assume that the vast majority of Manchester United fans are okay with at least the contents of what Richard Arnold said and the decision to go and meet the fans who were due to turn up at his house.
Yeah, I think what he said, the words are fine. There was honesty there. Fans are not stupid. They know that huge amounts have been squandered on players. They know that Manchester United have underperformed massively. All this is taking place under the cloud of the Glazer ownership of the club. So whatever the club do, and they've done lots of good stuff, smaller stuff, which has helped match-going fans. Ticket prices have not gone up for over a decade. Been loads of good initiatives. United were excellent during COVID, engaging with the local community. Didn't take furlough like other clubs did. But the mood is always dependent upon results. Now, there's been times when the fans have protested when Manchester United have been league champions. That takeover was hugely controversial, and the hangover is still prevalent now, 17 years later. Richard Arnold's got the best intentions. He knows what the fault lines are. He knows what the issues are. He's got a very, very tough job, as has Erik ten Hag. You're up against Manchester City with the way they're funded. You're up against Liverpool, who've recruited in a far smarter way than Manchester United. And pretty grim time for Manchester United. New managers come in. I spoke to lots of people in football about him. Got really good recommendations of him as a coach. Let's see what he's like as a manager. But when Ralph Rangnick came in, you also had people like Jurgen Klopp saying, wow, the Premier League's so lucky to have this guy. And that didn't work out either. I think he won 9 out of 27 matches. So it's difficult. You say Manchester United fans turn up. Can never speak for all Manchester United fans. I mean, I go to a lot of games. I speak to a lot of people. I try and get on board loads of different opinions, but so many different types of Manchester United fans, and they all want different things. You've got people who go to every single game home and away, might want something slightly different to someone who's never been to a match and just wants United to sign more players. Everyone's completely different, and the fan base is so fractured. It's basically thousands, maybe millions of groups of mates who all think they're all the right and that everyone else is wrong. So there's huge amounts of intolerance among Manchester United fans towards other Manchester United fans. And when the mood is grim, and it has been grim, there's a lot of tension around. There's tension outside the club. There's tension within the club. And it has not been a happy year so far for Manchester United. The main reason for that is that the football has been absolutely terrible. Terrible. It's all right seeing players in the gym. I wouldn't have minded seeing them turn up on the pitch at Selhurst Park last month. And I get the fact that they're showing that they're being professional. But excuse Manchester United fans for being a little bit circumspect at the moment and for being low on confidence on a lot of those players. It really has been an awful year, compounded by the fact that Manchester City won the league, Liverpool nearly won the league. Liverpool, clearly a brilliant team, reached another European Cup final, miles ahead of Manchester United. And to go to places like Anfield and stand in the away end and see your team destroyed is no fun. And Manchester United fans expect and deserve better without ever thinking they've got a divine right to win anything. These are the hard yards at the moment. Had loads of years of success and they were fantastic, but the times right now are anything but.
And Andy, what's a good season next season then? Like, what's your definition for what would qualify as one?
far better than last season. I think you've got to say top 4 because realistically, I can't see Manchester United winning the league. I'd love to see a manager starting to get his ideas across, his philosophy, his project, call it what you will. I'd like to see individuals playing far better than they have done. There's a big obsession with the transfer window at the moment. Well, I remember the last one and being delighted with it come the end of it because Jadon Sancho had been signed, Rafael Varane, Cristiano Ronaldo. Bringing players in is no quick fix, as Manchester United fans have learned. Most of the transfers in the post-Ferguson era have either underwhelmed or failed. United routinely make world-class players worse players. And if Erik ten Hag has got his own method and way of doing things, all power to his elbow. United have been led down the garden path so many times and signed big names, and all the fans, including myself, have got excited when people like Bastian Schweinsteiger have signed, Angel Di Maria, and so many of them have just not worked out. So that's another reason why Manchester United fans are circumspect, why they're cynical at the moment. So United fans need to see evidence that the club is not going down, that it's bottomed out, that things are improving. That said, just over a year ago, Manchester United finished second and reached the Europa League final. I think the Europa League is more Manchester United's level. It's glory, glory, Man United. Trophies are important. None have been won since 2017, but just to enjoy going to football again. I know most football fans don't see their team win trophies. I know that Manchester United fans will watch the team regardless. Season tickets sold out in no time with huge numbers. It's not just about the game, why you go and watch football, but United have underperformed so badly given the resources that have been put into the squad in the last few years, and he's got to get better. And I think it will get better because I think Erik ten Hag is a very good coach, but he'll need time, he'll need patience, just like all the other managers needed that as well. So if United can change this cycle of, okay, you're in for 2 years, we're not very good, let's try another manager, that would be great.
You said that there's such an obsession with the transfer window, and like with Manchester United, it is particularly easy to be swept up in the transfer window if you read everything online because they're linked to it, everybody. One of the real links at the moment is with Frankie de Jong, and while Manchester United have been criticised in the past for getting, I guess, caught up in a transfer saga that lasts the entirety of the summer, it does feel that the De Jong thing could turn into a saga, but it won't necessarily be Manchester United's fault. It's Barcelona trying to get every euro they possibly can given their own financial situation. And I guess Erik ten Hag, while he might be frustrated at the ongoing situation, he might just have to wait for a month or two before De Jong comes in. Is that basically the situation right now in that transfer dealing?
Well, there's a lot more detail to it, and I've seen it from both sides. Divided my time between Manchester and Barcelona for a long time, so I've got contacts at both clubs. I don't blame Barcelona for getting as much money as they can for a player who they paid 75 million euros for. A good player, popular player, but one of the few players there who they can get a lot of money for. One of the few who's not out of contract, has got the right age profile, but he earns a lot of money. He likes playing for Barcelona. He likes living in Barcelona. So you've got to take into consideration what the player wants, and you use the word saga. It certainly was with Cesc Fabregas. I wrote a piece about that last week for The Athletic, and I was all over that story in 2013, getting information from both ends. And even now, just filling in some blanks, such as David Moyes taking a call from Cesc Fabregas on the 1st of August that year, as he was on the service station on the M5 on the way down to watch a game at Swansea, and Cesc saying to him, I will come and join United if I don't get selected in the first game of the season for Barcelona. He did get selected. Barcelona won 7-0, 7-1. He played well. And suddenly United were scrambling around and ended up with Marouane Fellaini, who they always wanted, but they also wanted Cesc Fabregas. Ferguson always said the players who are most difficult to get are the ones worth working for. You've got a situation with Manchester United where you've got multiple agents linking their clients to the club. And fans, some of them who maybe don't understand the nuances of a transfer market, taking it at face value, thinking, oh, we're signing this player. Some of them are not on Manchester United's list. The vast majority of them are not on Manchester United's list. And yet fans hear a name, they don't know the player, they look into him, they Google him, oh, this could be good. And then they get let down when that player moves somewhere else. It's very difficult for Manchester United to stop that. What do you want them to do? Come out and deny every single link? With 22 links to different players, 20 different players on one day last week alone. So the media know, and I have editors as well, that transfer speculation sells. And it's just absolutely nuts. It's a bit depressing, actually, for journalism. You could do proper journalism. You could do a big investigative piece, and it would be read 1/10 of the numbers of a speculative transfer piece. And because United are a huge club, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And it's quite ridiculous. And I coined the term transfer junkie a few years ago, because there are some people who are absolutely obsessed with signing players to the point that I joke that the team could almost stop playing matches and just sign players, just focus entirely on signing players. Don't play any football matches. And this is the world that Manchester United are in at the moment. They've courted a global fan base. All these people want completely different things. But the fundamentals with the moment are United needs strengthening, will be strengthened, have a budget to strengthen, but are very reluctant to have the pants pulled down, as has happened many, many times in recent years for players, because agents taking a huge cut know that Manchester United have got a lot of money and might think that Manchester United are desperate. What I think will happen with Frankie is that United will try and bring it to a head and get an answer, yes or no, because can't be chasing a player for the next 2 months. There's got to be better planning put in than that. But he's a great player. I think he'd do really well. I've watched him an awful lot. I've spoke to a lot of professional football managers about him. And if he signed, that would be really good, I think, for Manchester United. I would have also said exactly the same, or almost, of almost all the players who have signed in the post-Ferguson years.
What's interesting, this kind of brings us back full circle to the Richard Arnold's chat, is what Manchester United have done in the transfer market in the past, which is paying above the odds for players, whether when it comes to transfer fees or to players' wages. And one of the lines that stuck out to me from the Richard Arnold hidden camera stuff was, hidden cameras actually is probably overstating what it was, the phone recording of him. Money is not a consideration in who we want. It's if the manager wants him. They've actually done the work on looking if he's a great player. And again, is it 100, is it 200? Get who you effing want. Now I know he's not necessarily saying there that we'll splash money on whatever and we'll give the manager any sort of cash he wants, but it does say to me that there is a huge bank of cash there that Manchester United are willing to spend in a way that other clubs aren't. And I'm not necessarily sure that that part of the Richard Arnold chat is going to do Manchester United any favours in the transfer market.
Well, it's not. And there is money there. And United are of the view that a lot of clubs don't have money, still coming out of this COVID shadow. And United would have even more money if the team had reached the Champions League, but didn't. A lot of wages have been offloaded. United's wage bill was atrocious, as was Barcelona. So they're in a difficult situation as well, a more pronounced situation than Manchester United. There's money there, and United don't want the pants pulling down. But if you want to buy a top player, you've got to pay top money for it. I thought United did well in Jadon Sancho because Dortmund held out 110 million, 110, and United got him for 30 million less than that by negotiating pretty smartly. I'm not going to say now, after a pretty mediocre first season for Jadon Sancho, that that's a steal of the century, because it clearly wasn't. But I think the way that United didn't jump in and didn't do as some fans say, break the bank, pay him what he wants, because that has led to the problems of recent years. It's led to Alexis Sanchez getting paid what he wants. It was a disaster. annoyed all the other players in the dressing room. There's got to be a level of dressing room harmony beyond individual names to make Manchester United start functioning as a team again. And you have players like Anthony Martial earning more money than Mohamed Salah. I know who's been more effective. He doesn't wear the red of Manchester in recent years. And United have got to be smarter. Recruitment's got to be smarter. Use of the funds, because there's a massive budget there to pay players, has got to be smarter as well. But I'm saying all this from a position of weakness because players will be looking at the clubs, and United are not as attractive as they once were, but still very attractive, still a huge club, still got the name. But you saw with Darwin Núñez, and United weren't seriously in for him, but could you blame him for going to Liverpool when you see the football there, when you see the manager there? Yeah. You can understand why people are looking at other clubs now. And United are no longer top of the transfer tree. And
that's probably the thing that's accelerating the Twitter frenzy around Manchester United and being linked with players, is that Liverpool have got Darwin Núñez, Manchester City have got Erling Haaland. Their two biggest rivals are two clubs that have already completed significant pieces of business.
I don't think Manchester United should succumb to a Twitter frenzy, as you called it. I don't see Jurgen Klopp taking on board what Liverpool's Twitter fans are saying. You've got to be strong in your decision making. And there's been times where Manchester United have been weak in their decision making. And it leads to signing players because of a Twitter frenzy, because they're available at the right price, even though Manchester United know that they're not signing a player for the first team, which is ridiculous. The problem with the Twitter frenzy is they'll never be happy. So United could sign De Jong tomorrow and there'd still be people saying, well, what about another player? You could bring 7 players in and they'd still want an 8th player. It's the junkie thing. It's looking for the next hit all the time. And it's dangerous. Well, that's fans. Fans are entitled to their opinions. It's the club who's got to be smarter in their decision-making, in their recruitment, in their use of the huge amount of funds that they've got available.
It's going to be an interesting summer. Andy Mitten, great stuff as ever. Thanks, Millie, for joining us.
Thank you.
Cheers. Andy Mitten there on the line, reacting to a fairly interesting few days. The 1958 getting a lot of time under the microscope. An underground group of Reds intent on upholding the values of Manchester United, its culture and traditions, in case anybody wanted to know what the 1958 was. So I'm not sure if Richard Arnold's going to be going for pints with any Manchester United fans anytime soon.
No, I mean, it's not great really, was it? I mean, there's obviously the substance of what he said and you can pick that apart, but like, I think if someone decides to go and meet the fans, you don't record it. Like, sometimes, you know, people in football, like they will be accused of operating in a bubble, and not unfairly, and being a bit detached from reality and various things, but like sometimes that's born out of like a deep suspicion of people and thinking you're going to be trapped all the time. So it doesn't help when you go and do something and that's actually what happens. Yeah. You know, it's like a stitch up. Like that just drives people into their sort of into their gated community existence, you know. They feel, well, this is, if we go out there, that'll end badly for you. If you communicate with these people, this is what they'll do to you, and that's not what you want to sort of foster those relations. And
I believe that the leaker from the 1958 has been removed from the 1958.
Oh, he's gone now. There was a secret meeting and that was it.
I believe so. There's good a soap opera if you into it.
I don't think there was much case as well. Like, it was clearly you could figure out where he was sitting based on
I'm pretty
the
sure there's a
angle
picture of him online. Yeah,
and
I'm pretty sure he shared it as well on Twitter. With the big man.
Yeah, it's sort of. I can't imagine he had much of a defence case to sort of mount in that case, you know.
Manchester United, just the gift that keeps on giving. It is 9:13 on this Tuesday morning, and OTB AM is brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. Here's what we've got coming up on OTB Sports Radio over the next few hours. OTB Gold is Keith Andrews in conversation with Philly McMahon. 3 o'clock is the Dadcast. 4 o'clock is a career retrospective with Stephen Elliott, and from 6 o'clock is OTB Gold with Mayo legend Cora Staunton. Off the ball is live on your radio tonight with special guest Neda Manua and Paul Mannion, so you don't want to miss that. You can follow Off the Ball across all our social channels, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and be sure to download the OTB Sports app for the latest and best in sports content and analysis. We are back after these with Cathal Malani talking LIV and talking the US Open, talking Rory McIlroy. But before that, here is Gary Murphy on all those golf themes.
I thought he did really well. He didn't have his best stuff at all. He opened up well in the first round, but I think superior putting masked a lot. He was chasing his tail the whole week, and he still pulls out a top 5 finish, which I think he'll take a lot from that. There's no doubt the previous week took a lot out of him, whether he came in a little bit flat emotionally, and he just didn't seem to drive the ball as well as he normally does. But I think he scrapped his way to the top 5, and they're much better signs out of McIlroy than anything. So I think, whilst it's another major that he hasn't won, he's back to number 2 in the world. He seems to be the kind of governor of the PGA Tour at the moment, and seems to have more steel in his eyes than in recent seasons. So I think it's all good for Rory. He'll be very excited to go to St Andrews. It's one of his favourite golf courses. And if the weather's not too crazy, he will undoubtedly be thereabouts.
I mean, the putting has improved beyond all recognition. And as you said, masked over his driver issues and longer game issues, which are generally so sound and were so sound in Canada just a week prior. So the putting is extraordinary, and like Brad Faxon in commentary takes such pleasure every time Rory holds in a 20-footer because he's worked with him. And then the wedge game seems to be improving month on month, and was really the key to the win in Canada. It does make it a touch frustrating. I mean, maybe it is tiredness as to why he didn't have his A game. It was notable that Justin Thomas and Tony Finau did nothing in this tournament either. So maybe there was a hangover from that very dramatic Sunday. Yeah. Who knows?
And, he's judged too harshly. Sure. Justin Thomas won USPGA and he shot, I think he was, 8 over yesterday?
Yeah.
John Rahm. Can you imagine if Rory had been in John Rahm's position and shot 3 over the last round? It'd be the end of the world over here. So,
yeah.
I think Rory, there's some weeks, Joe, where 10th is your best week, or it could be 25th. And I think that 5th was probably a win for Rory last week. I know there's no silverware with it, but I think he got a lot out of that tournament, not having his best stuff.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station. The Football Pod on OTB Sports.
Do you still listen to the Football Pod, or is that like texting your ex?
Absolutely. As I often said, I'm jealous that O'Donoghue is so good, the little whore, but he's... it's brilliant. I listened to the one yesterday. Thank God for Tommy Rooney. I won't say that too often, but thank God for him. At least he stood up for me a bit. But the two boys were very big on Kerry yesterday.
The Football Pod is available every Tuesday exclusively on the OTB Sports app.
Things that put people off on a first date. Showing up late and getting your name wrong. Always a great start. Looking at their phone more than you? Hello? Someone who only talks about themselves. Oh, really? God, aren't you great? Look, no one said dating is perfect, but at GoDating.ie, we promise we'll always try and find your perfect match. Because somewhere out there, there's someone for you. And GoDating.ie will help you find them. Yes, even you, socks and sandals guy. Go on, go for it with GoDating.ie.
OTB AM
with Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
9:17, you're very welcome back to OTB AM, which is brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. Cathal Malani has joined us in studio. Cathal, a very good morning to you.
Good morning, lads. How are you?
Very well. So we did a bit of a dive into the US Open yesterday, and I guess the context around the US Open was largely to do with LIV Golf, and I guess everybody was basking in the failure of Phil Mickelson over the course of the weekend, as is a pretty easy thing to do. What's going to be interesting is that this story is not going to go away, and over the next couple of days what we're going to get is the European Tour stance on LIV Golf.
Yeah, that's going to be crucial. I think there's 2 crucial decisions coming up. That is one of them. We're expecting some news on that on Thursday from the European Tour, the DP World Tour, as it's known now. And then the decision of the major championships longer term in terms of whether they will allow the LIV players to play in their events, and that could be the one that sways it one way or the other for the bigger players who want to add major championships to their CV. So I suppose the ball is very much in the DP World Tour's court at the moment. The sense is, and the word is, that they will come down pretty heavily on the LIV players that have gone over to the new series. They have to kind of follow the PGA Tour's lead in that regard because they've got a strategic alliance, and they've got some co-sanctioned events and quite a close working relationship now, so you'd imagine that they will align with them in terms of suspending players or banning players from the DP World Tour that have played with the LIV Golf Tour so far, and that may stem some of the flow, but it's very, very hard to see how they can withstand the scale of the money that's on offer to these players longer term.
What do you do if you're like Fred Ridley and the Masters? Like, do you just lean into this thing now and say that we could have an exclusive situation where we do bring the best golfers in the world together? Or are you protectors of the game and thinking to yourself, actually, you know what, screw you, all you LIV golfers?
Yeah, so the thing about the Masters is that like they lean so heavily on the previous champions dinner, like the former winners, and the fact that so many former winners have gone over there, and there's speculation about more, like, is Adam Scott going to go, or there's more question marks. I don't know if they're going to go down that road. Now, obviously,
the dinner is the thing that will.
The dinner is like we don't have all these empty seats at the dinner. Like, we're going to have to start inviting lads who came second. But I think the big thing about Seamus Power, of course, getting into the Masters was the top 50 in the world ranking, which is a big part of like the prestige of you've got into the Masters, and where this thing is clearly going is going to be towards the status. Like, you see, they're trying to get some kind of world ranking points for the LIV events, even though they're 54 hole team events. It's not really tournament golf to the same degree. It's like, can you get world ranking points for something that's not the length of a sort of a regulation tournament? So what will happen is that a lot of the LIV golfers will, if they're not playing PGA Tour events and their own events aren't getting ranking points for them, then their world ranking will naturally drop and drop and drop and drop. So the previous champions will be fine, but it'll be harder for the other LIV golfers to get into the majors. So there's a form of putting up a barrier there. But I don't know. It's like you get the sense that the US Open and stuff like that, it's very much like, well, we couldn't pull up the drawbridge after it's done. I mean, you have this bizarre situation this week for the DP World Tour where Sergio Garcia, Louis Oosthuizen and Martin Keimer are playing in Germany in the BMW Open because the entry list was done up before all this came out. So they're now playing in a European Tour DP World Tour event this week. Possibly on the day that they find out, well, you can't play in anymore. Yeah. So the soap opera sort of is just rolling on. Like, I'm sort of captivated by it / horrified by it, but it's never been as interesting a time, I think, for people to be sort of on the golf beat.
What do you think the majors will do?
I think the Open Championship is going to be very interesting because the R&A traditionally have seen themselves as the I suppose the founders of golf, and it's at the home of golf. It's 150th Open Championship at St Andrews, and if they come down hard, I think they'll want to take a lead worldwide with this. And if they were to ban the players, it would be a big thing to happen. But you also have to tally that against the spectacle. And if you ban these players, and granted, some of them are, Dustin Johnson is a big name. Patrick Reed, Bryson DeChambeau are set to go across as well to the LIV Golf Tour, it's reported. So if those players are all committed to it and you ban them from the major championships, are you weakening your product and by extension weakening the significance of maybe winning an Open Championship, which is something that they don't want to do? My sense is that the DP World Tour will come down heavily on the players this week and follow the PGA Tour's lead, but the major championships really is the more important one. And you could see a scenario where if the major championships were to allow the players to play and the LIV Golf Series gets up and running to the 12 or 14 events that they're rumoured to have, or they want to have in a couple of years' time, that an 18 tournament schedule between the LIV Tour and the 4 majors would sit quite nicely with quite a lot of the players, I think. But you would imagine there will be a unified kind of stance between the various organisations that run the major championships and then the 2 major tours as well. But Paul McGinley had some quotes, I think, in the papers this morning about that this is going to fracture golf for quite a long time, and that it could be hard to come back from it, and it's hard to disagree with that theory. And you just wonder what the atmosphere is between the players as well on the tour. And of course you have to consider the implications for the Ryder Cup, which is such a huge revenue driver for the likes of the European Tour. And I think it's probably the one event alongside the Masters and maybe the Open Championship that generates interest among non-golf fans for a week, that they'll tune into it and they can buy into the team element and the match play format. But where does the Ryder Cup land if so many players are excluded from playing in it?
Yeah, I'm trying to think which team is more affected by it. Like I presume
Well, it's sort of, but it's a bit like the LIV Tour. It's like a lot of the veterans have been taken out. Like it's sort of like you've taken out a lot of the sort of over 40s. I think the problem with the European team was it was becoming maybe a tournament too far, in the sense of, like, though Sergio still performed quite well in the Ryder Cup, but Sergio, Westwood, Poulter, of course. Mr. Ryder Cup himself, even though he wasn't very good in the last one. So a lot of them are gone. I mean, the American have lost more. The whole LIV sort of recruitment policy has been, they haven't been able to get any of the really good guys, with the exception of Dustin Johnson, but they've gone for like the wild card people who would sell. But I can't imagine the team room dynamics is going to be affected too much by Bryson being taken out there, or like Patrick Reed. He doesn't even go on with his family. Like, do you know what I mean? So, like, there's
an endless pit of American golfers, it turns out.
There is, and like I think Brooks Koepka is the interesting one now because his brother's gone with LIV, but even his sort of status is a little bit diminished in the last year as well. So it's sort of 50-50 in terms of the impact. I mean, Europe definitely don't have the depth, but then they've got Matt Fitzpatrick now, and still have Hovland and Seamus Power. It's going to be practically an Irish team at this stage, the way things are going. If on the rankings, it actually probably would be to be 3 of them, they'd be in there.
What would, we kind of tossed this around last week a little bit, what would happen if LIV Tour set up an Irish event, or decided that they would come down to Adair Manor, a year out from the Ryder Cup?
Go to Doonbeg, surely, wouldn't they?
Doonbeg, yeah, sorry, that would make perfect sense. Yeah. What sort of gallery would it get? Because it certainly feels to me that the thing has kind of been brushed aside as something that people don't care about. The galleries aren't spectacular, and I guess without an attendance, it feels that it's a bit of a non-event. But it does feel to me that no matter what the field is in the Irish Open, as long as you've got a few Irish golfers thrown in, a little bit of stardust, you will generally get a massive crowd at the Irish Open. Like, that might just be my experience being there, and it feels like an event.
It's basically, I'm going down next week, but I think it's sold out for the weekend. There's 5 of the top 50 there. But I mean, the field for the JP McManus Pro-Am the week after, I was only looking at it yesterday, and it has some big names like Tiger and Rory, but it's practically a who's who of the LIV golf event below it as well.
Well, yeah. So
they're all there.
So my question is, I just think we're so mad for attending live sport, and I think we've kind of shown up in great numbers to the Irish Open down through the years. What would happen if LIV Golf showed up here? Would we have a massive turnout?
Yeah, well, I think the initial event in London last week, there was kind of a strange atmosphere. I watched a bit of it on YouTube, but the Vox Box that I heard, the fans didn't really care about the background to it at all. They just wanted to see
how many of them had paid. I mean, that was the key thing.
That's the thing.
That was a slight thing as well.
Yeah.
I think if it happened here, we might have a load of Instagram influencers sent to it. Do you know what I mean? That's what they would do. They would that would be a good portion of your fan base there.
And that'll be the sort of stamp of authority that LIV Golf needs.
This would be it, yeah.
And then Rory McIlroy will be over because, I don't know, the happy pair have gone to LIV Golf.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. People would go, but I mean, I don't know, I'm still a little bit sceptical that I think the format of their events is still a bit... I don't know.
Well,
I think people are going to take photos, which is maybe that's all they want, is people to be there, whether they care who wins or not.
Well, that's the thing. It's a glorified exhibition match, really, at the end of the day. I mean, there's absolutely no significance attached to whether you win or lose in terms of the title that you get. It's just a check at the end of the day. And they're all guaranteed money when they show up.
I think it's a good point that you make as well about the 54 holes and ranking points. It's you can't give out ranking points for a tournament that's just not a full tournament.
It's like a 75-minute football match. Yeah. Saying, actually, we're going to play a load of 75-minute football matches, but can we still have a FIFA ranking to get seeded for the World Cup draw? So I think any of the LIV guys who aren't major champions with sort of with prolonged shelf life. Like this thing with the younger lads going into it, and there's not that many, but some of them have. It's going to be hard for them to climb the rankings to get into the majors. So that's why they're going to try and find a compromise eventually. And
they can't go to 72 holes because LXXII has nowhere near the ring of.
Yeah,
that is the whole point underpinning this.
But I see Matt Fitzpatrick's brother Alex is actually making his pro debut in the Irish Open next week. But he turned down. He was speaking today or yesterday, but he turned down the LIV Golf. They went after him just out of college, offering like £2 million to go in, and he said no. But I mean, it's very hard for lads just out of college to go. There you go. Yeah.
Credit to him for doing that, actually, and he said that he obviously has had a good amateur career, but he spoke to his brother and went through it, but he said it was like a figure that he couldn't comprehend, even the amount of money that he was being offered. So it just shows what they have, and they've got 1.6 billion, I think, set aside to develop it over the next couple of years. It's just mind-boggling, total, you know.
At a point when the questions, you'd imagine, will start to dissipate a little bit.
Exactly. So I actually think it's been a reasonable enough start for LIV Golf and the names that they've got. And I thought it was an okay start in terms of the tournament that they had, the names that they had. It actually went quite well, I thought. And it's going to be very interesting now because next week the first event in the States is on opposite the Irish Open.
Yeah.
So that's going to be the real litmus test, because if you can get more players over that side of the pond that maybe didn't fancy travelling across to Europe, and they've got a pretty easy schedule in their home country, but not too far to travel, and a relatively easy schedule in terms of the intensity of the events and the schedule of the events. That's going to be the real test, I think.
For sure. It's going to be very, very interesting to see what happens. Cathal, thanks for popping in. Dan, thank you for popping in this morning. Enjoy Rovers Bows on Friday night. OTB AM brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. We're going to be back tomorrow morning from 7:30, where Johnny Ward will be in Dan's seat. We'll be previewing the All-Ireland Senior Football quarter-finals as well, and we'll be looking back on Wexford's season with hurler Matthew O'Hanlon. We're going to have much more besides as well. Right now we are leaving you with Kilkenny legend Tommy Welch reviewing those hurling quarter-finals. See you tomorrow.
So let's start with the weekend's action then on the Saturday. It was a double-header at Semple Stadium, 35,000, although it had that odd quality sometimes double-header matches can, whereby the crowds for Clare Wexford aren't quite in for all of the first game, and then quite a few of the Cork fans, maybe a bit disappointed, decide to hit the road early. So maybe it doesn't crackle in the way you would like for either game.
Yeah, it wasn't what I was expecting, Joe. I thought we'd have a full house. I thought it was kind of like in the soccer, you have Super Sunday. I thought it'd be like Super Saturday below in Thurles. A cracking atmosphere, full house, and just four teams. They were both 50-50 games, so four teams with, I suppose, the dream of making the All-Ireland semi-final and then the All-Ireland final. So it didn't quite happen that way, and as you said, it was actually a full house, but it's divided by four. And for, the first game, some of the second teams weren't in on the same for the first game. Difficult to know why exactly. I suppose there is a cost of living crisis, and that's adding to people's considerations. I know, I think it's just purely down to the maths of it, that the crowd is divided by four. And, even if they were all in there, you've only a quarter of the, usually it's 50-50, and you probably cram everybody into it. There'll be far more numbers at the game, and it's easier to create a kind of us against them kind of, but when it's divided by four, it's much more difficult, Joe. Yeah. Did you like playing double headers? You probably didn't play too many of them. Not really did we play in too many of them, but we were used to an atmosphere in Croke Park anyway, Joe. So until you got to the All-Ireland semi-final, All-Ireland final, the atmosphere wasn't electric. We played once or twice in Tullamore. That was when you hear the Munster teams talking about the atmosphere down in the Munster Championship, we're seeing that now with the round robin. So we've seen that in a couple of times in Tullamore, but usually in Croke Park, very difficult. Now, we were delighted and appreciate that we got to play in Croke Park every time. But the atmosphere, you had to, I suppose, sacrifice the atmosphere for that. So we played one down against Cork. They beat us in 2013. And it's a Saturday is sometimes a tough day to get up for. It's a working day. The matches are usually early in the day. You're usually playing on a Sunday. It's usually 3:30 or 4 o'clock. So it definitely did feel like a Saturday game. Yeah. Sure, Kilkenny fans didn't really travel anyway until about the All-Ireland final stage. We went to the club games, Joe, first. We might start with Clare 124, Wexford 314 then.
This was interesting. I suppose if it's a sign of a good team that you can win when you're playing badly, then we can apply that to Clare, because they weren't themselves. And Lohan admitted as much afterwards. Brian Lohan even said some of our marquee players weren't quite their usual selves. Hard to know why something like that happens, but it did happen to Clare at the weekend.
It did, but I would put a lot of it down to the matchups from Darragh Egan. He got his matchups absolutely spot on. He had big men on small men. He had fast guys on fast guys. And just looking at some of them, he had Shane Wreck on Tony Kelly, Joe. Shane Wreck held Tony Kelly to a point from play last year. He was out injured for most of this campaign, but he sprung him. He had confidence in him. He had faith in him. He sprung the time that Shane Wreck was on the field. He definitely had the measure of Tony Kelly. He just ran with him no matter where he went. Other than that, you had Paddy Foley went out with David Fitzgerald. David Fitzgerald scoring 4 or 5 points from play regularly throughout the Munster round robin campaign. He didn't get a snuff and he was taken off. Marking Paddy Foley, big, strong, probably 6'2", 6'3" defender. He went out with David Fitz. Other than that, Jenny had Damien Wreck on Shane O'Donnell. He did well in him. A match on Peter Duggan. And I thought I suppose the great positive for him is he found Jong Connor the vet out in Ryan Taylor, a cornerback, out following the guy out round midfield. And I thought he had an absolutely exceptional day for Wexford. So I thought the reason Clare didn't play, obviously there was a small hangover from the Munster final, but Darragh Egan got his matchup spot on for that game.
Has Egan impressed you this season? Yeah, well, I Darragh Egan a good couple of times, and he does powerful work down in his club down in North Tipperary, down near Puckane, and you know, they've a great underage set up down there. Killadangan, they were in the county finals last 2. So Darragh Egan impresses me all the time from the work that he puts in at club level, and he's transferring that now to his time with Liam Sheedy and now out on his own. Like, they had a fabulous league campaign up until the league semi-final, and then after a tough start to the Leinster round robin, they have resurrected, which showed he has guts, he has spirit, and he's not afraid to make the big calls. So how do Wexford then look back on 2022 season? Where are they in the reckoning?
I think they'll be very disappointed, Joe. Like 2019, if they had to win the All-Ireland semi-final against Tipperary, they had Kilkenny in the final. They would always fancy their chances against Kilkenny. Again this year, if they had to beat Clare, they would have Kilkenny in a semi-final with a chance to get into the final. I definitely think it was a great chance that they had. They were 6 points up with probably 11 minutes to go. Now, add in the injury time, there was still a lot of time left, but it probably all hinged on the chances. I suppose Lee Chin's penalty, was it or was it not? And then the goal, if Mark Fanning had to keep that in his hand. And we've seen, goalkeeping errors all day. And if a midfielder does that out the field, nobody bats an eyelid. Unfortunately, if a goalie drops the ball, it can have tough, big effects on your team. So I think massive chance for Wexford this year. Like 2019, I think they will be disappointed.
And you referred to it there, Lee Chin. He was brought down by Keane Nolan in on goal. Penalty and black card was the most extreme option for the referee. What was your reading it?
Yeah, sure. I didn't realise that rule was still being applied, Joe. I haven't seen it in so long. They were talking on the Sunday game last night about an imaginary line that ref has to imagine an imaginary 25-metre line in from the sideline. Like, unless Batman or Superman is going to come back and start refereeing games, I think we may forget about that anyway. I think if they want to apply that rule, and it is probably a good rule, to stop people just dragging down a guy and receive very little punishment, I think they'll just have to actually, as they said last night, the groundsman will have to go in and put in the line. We have a good lad in Tullaroan, Tom Clear. He's a great man to line the pitch 3 and 4 times a week. So Crow Park are looking for anyone there for the All-Ireland semi-finals. I'm sure we'll give Tom a lift up there and he'll do it. No problem. Free of charge even. I thought there was no cynical play in hurling as well. That was the other surprise. No tactics, no cynical play. We just, listen, you take the belts, you give the belts, and the cynicism, listen, we just get on with it, we don't complain about it. So I hear. On Claire's point then, so they're dicing with death a little bit, and there's a period over 13 minutes where Wexford go from 2 points down to 6 points ahead, and there's an hour on the clock. Now that is where Clare are going to start feeling a little bit edgy, and in fairness to them, they replied brilliantly with 1-6. Certain players stood up. Shane O'Donnell was to the fore even when other marquee names weren't having their best day.
And you would have to look at the Clare bench and say it more than played its part. You have Shanahan coming on, you have Meehan coming on. They managed 1-4 between them. And then even Mark Rogers made an impact. So, again, if you're following that maxim of takes a good team to win whilst playing badly, also having that strength in depth, and that strength in depth delivering when it was required, these are good omens as they head into a semi-final. If not, something they can get too excited about based on the performance as a whole.
Yeah, and I think you're 100% there, and I think Brian Lohan deserves huge credit, Joe. He was ruthless with his decisions last weekend. Rory Hayes, he's marking Flanagan the last day, and in the Munster final, he had a great game, but then Seamus Flanagan scored, 7 or 8 points, and then there was the saga of being suspended, or will he be back for the game? He made it back. He lasted 7 minutes. Had him taken off. Lee Chin won the first 2 balls off him, and he made kind of a little fumble as well. 7 minutes. You never hear of that in inter-county or the club game. I thought it was, that was Brian Lohan thinking of Clare, thinking of the team, not thinking of individuals. His loyalty is to the team, and he took him off, and then he brought on young Keane Norton. He had a serious game when he came on. And then on the other side, Aaron Shanahan scored 1-2 when he came on. Shane Meehan scored 2 points. And as you said there, when they came on, it kind of had a domino effect. Not only did they play well, but Tony Kelly came into the game then. Shane O'Donnell came into the game. So it just had a domino effect on the whole game. I think Brian Lohan deserves huge credit for them decisions. But Shanahan, where was Shanahan all year, Joe? I was asking these questions. Like, this man was one of their main players for the last few years. I couldn't understand why he wasn't, coming in or even starting. I know he came on in one of the games in the round robin series, but I hadn't seen him up to that and didn't see him afterward. So listen, that just goes to show maybe he wasn't right and he wasn't fit maybe, but he's definitely after coming back at the real right time. And Brian Lohan will be absolutely delighted with him.
Yes, absolutely. A bit of a collector's item to see so many wides from Tony Kelly.
Yeah, and that's the sign of a good team as well. No excuses. They're not going to blame anyone. You just get on with it. Tony Kelly could have been taken off at half-time, taken off after 40 minutes. But no, they know these great players. It might be in the last 10 minutes when they, come to the fore. And that's what Tony Kelly did. Now, you see, the other side of it as well is when you miss frees now, a free taker used to only come out as far as about 55 yards, Joe. Now they're going back as far as 85, 90, 100 yards to take these frees. So a free from 85, 90 yards, that's only ever probably a 40, 60 chance. But statistically then, you're missing frees. It goes down as a missed free against your name. So that has to be taken into account also. It's different when you're missing them from 55 and in. Then I chalk them down as, missed frees. But anywhere outside of that, I would see him from 65 on, either a 50-50 or even a 40-60 chance. But listen, great credit goes to Tony Kelly. They went over to Peter Duggan. Peter Duggan missed the first one as well. But he stayed going, and they eventually, I thought down that home stretch as well, Peter Duggan won an awful lot of the aerial ball. And he can talk about systems and tactics. That's a part of the game. And as I always say, the major part of this game is still being able to win your own ball. And Peter Duggan did that in buckets down the last stretch.
It's going to be a fun Saturday evening, Saturday week, 2nd of July, 5:30 throw in Clare against Kilkenny. Brian Cody, you suspect, was a very astute observer of what Dara Egan tried to do to Clare on Saturday. Where will Kilkenny go after Clare?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'd say tactics could go out the window in this semi-final. There was a huge build-up and a huge media attention around Henry Shefflin versus Brian Cody. I would see even more of a attention around Brian Lohan versus Brian Cody. I think they're two similar type characters. They kind of rule that sideline. They give very little away emotionally rather than driving on their team. Both of them have huge respect, huge authority. They're silent, quiet type of guys, but with tough personalities. Everyone kind of, even when you just meet them, you kind of respect them and look up to them. So I think the battle really will be, I say the physicality stakes really. Tactics go out the window on this semi-final.
And tell me this, if they're similar personalities, who'll initiate the handshake? Maybe neither will. There could be a standoff.
Hey, we're not talking about handshakes anymore. I'd say what Brian Cody has been brilliant at through all the years is his matchups as well.
Yeah.
So he might copy Darry Egan on that, Joe.
Yeah. So, I mean, when you say tactics go out the window, of course they won't, or maybe they will once the ball is thrown in. But in advance, there'll be a lot of planning, a lot of thinking, a lot of matchups. So, for instance, who looks after Tony Kenny for Kilkenny?
Tony Kelly, sure. Who's been doing the man marking all year is probably Mikey Butler. So, you know, and he's been doing that quite well. But
and how do they match up in your eye, Tommy?
Yeah, listen, I think with Tony Kelly, he receives a lot of ball off the shoulder when he's out the field. So when he's inside, it's kind of just man on man, like the old way. You just have to be out in front of him. You have to be able to win the ball when it comes in, watch it when he's spinning around. But it's out the field is where he's lethal, and that he's might be jogging around, but next minute a burst of pace, he's gone, gets 5 or 6 yards. 5 or 6 yards on his defender, and next minute he's in space and it's over the bar. So I think the key thing is when you're marking him out the field is stick tight to him, and as Christy Ring said, even when the ball is in the referee's pocket, that's the key to marking Tony Kelly.
And it's easier said than done. He's always on the move, he's very fit, he stays patient. That's going to be an unbelievable tussle to watch, and especially Croke Park, where there is just that extra feeling of space.
Yeah, and it's confidence, Joe, and experience of the big day. If you have no confidence and you're being marked out a game for 50-55 minutes, suddenly your substitute comes up on the board. The third official puts it up. You're looking over. Is that my number? No, it's not. Yes, it is. You're relieved if it's not, waiting for another 5 minutes, hoping to get a score. If it is, you're disappointed, you're gone off. Tony Kelly doesn't have that worry because he is proven. And this is where it comes down to proving it. You have to prove it on the field of play. He has proved it in the past now that he can be marked out for 55 minutes, but you have to mark him for 70. And he showed it. It was Damien Reck was giving him a great matchup, I thought, the weekend. But he stayed going. And there was a rumour that he was injured coming into that game as well, Tony Kelly. And I was watching him in the warm-up. He didn't partake in the little, small, mini-side games. So possibly he is carrying injury on top of all that. And what it comes down to, I think, experience. If that was another forward breaking onto the team, Joe, he's gone after 55 minutes. He didn't produce it. But because Tony has done it in the past, you know, they'll have confidence by knowing. And I don't know, did you see the camera angle where it showed? Remember when Tony Kelly caught the ball on the ground and went over and put the ball over the bar? Brian Lohan's face was nearly in awe as he was doing it. They caught it lovely on the RT cameras. And he was nearly saying to himself, wow, did they just see that? And like we all were, it was a magical score. So
that's my boy. That's why he stays on no matter how it's going. And on paper for you, Clare and Kilkenny, who has the better set of hurlers?
I'm saying it all year. Limerick are the out-and-out team. They're 10 or 15% above everybody else, talent-wise, physicality. They have the size, 5 or 6 lads over 6'4", 6'5", but everybody else is a level playing field. We saw that the weekend. Wexford could have bet Clare, Cork could have bet Galway. It'll be the same, Kilkenny and Clare. It's a 50-50 one. I don't think the Kilkenny team gets enough credit. Yes, they get credit for their physicality, their determination, their will to go to the very end, never being beaten. I've been watching these lads at club level. They're fabulous hurlers on that Kilkenny team, and that's a very, very good Kilkenny team.
Why do you think people have that perception of them then?
Because they're coming from the great team of the past, you know, and it's like any team, the Dublin team, football team at the moment. Like, you tell me if Conor O'Callaghan and all these lads, Dean Rock and all them Dublin footballers were on the, say, a Kerry team or a Meath team, sure, they'll probably be the favourites to win the All-Ireland. But because they're coming after that great Dublin football team, they're probably not.
So what do you think Clare and Kilkenny will come down to then, if you're saying maybe tactics could go out the window and maybe it takes on a life of its own?
I think Munster final. I think that's where we're heading for with this game. I think it'll very much be they'll probably both play with 2 lads inside and everyone else will be following each other out the field. I wouldn't think we'll have a D. O'Keefe type scenario where he's hanging out in the backline as a spare man all the time, which obviously leaves a spare Clare guy as well. I think Kilkenny, like the Clare and Limerick Munster final, they will just go hammer and tongs. And I think Brian Lohan and Brian Cody, they're so headstrong, they'll say, you know what, let's take them on. Neither of them will expect, I'd say, a rabbit out of the hat from the opposition management team. So I think they'll both expect that we'll take each other on, like the old boxers, Muhammad Ali and that. We'll go Rocky Balboa, let's go at it, and best man wins. And I think that's what'll happen, like the Munster final.
What are the outstanding selection dilemmas for Cody then? Does he know his best 15?
I know where this is going, Joe.
I don't know what you're talking about.
We'll see. It'll depend on how they're going in training.
But the truth is, he hasn't settled on a 15 yet that you could hang your hat on.
But he never has. As he said, he's always goes in a settled spirit, you know, and he has said that openly and probably has stuck to that over the years. Sometimes he has a settled team, sometimes he hasn't. But you'll probably see very few changes, I would say, Joe, from now on, like from the Leinster final on. Round robin series is a bit different with injuries and matches coming thick and thick. Like, I think, you know, Richie Reid has settled at 6, Paddy Deegan on the wing, Mikey Carey under the wing, Hughie Lawler's having a great year full back since he came back from injury and pre-injury, Mikey Butler and young Tommy Welch, they're nearly nailed on in there. Up front, like Adrian Mullen is playing great out midfield. Conor Ford came on the last day and marked, who were playing Galway, he marked, was it Cathal Mannion or Tom Monaghan? So listen, I can't see that many changes. Maybe one or two, like the old Cody Way maybe.
So you, down the years, would have seen certain players light it up in training and then get into a starting 15 spot on the back of what they were doing in training. And maybe on occasion there were other players who went very, very well in training and couldn't quite force themselves in for whatever reason. Did you, over the years, get a feel for what Cody was thinking or why some got in and others didn't?
Well, yeah, if you're in with a chance, yeah, if you were playing well, you're always within a chance, but you couldn't predict it. As a player, I couldn't predict if a lad was flying it. Yeah, he's definitely going to be playing, but I knew he had a chance. I knew when they flip over the flip chart that Friday night inside the Ted Carroll stand, I knew that when they did that, anything can happen. Anyone in form is in with a 50-50 chance of starting. One or two lads over the years, I felt if they had to be born in 5 years earlier or 5 years later, they would have been on the team every day. John Dalton was one from Carrickshock. He lit it up every day in training. But we had a very settled backline at that time. You know, we had Jackie, we had JJ, Brian Hogan, Michael Kavanagh, Paul Murphy. Like, we had a lot of backs they kind of got all together as such. If there had to be more of a changeover, John Dalton would definitely have been in there. He was one of my favourite hurlers, and even at club level, he used to play full-back, centre-back for Carrickshock. A lot of the time full-back, but he was deceptively very, very fast. And he won a lot with Carrickshock, but John Dalton could do anything with a ball as well, and he's a big, strong lad. But he probably could have got more game time, you know, if he had to be born a couple of years earlier or later, you know.
Timing's everything, I guess. Was Cody big on not leaking the team and keeping the team quiet, or did he mind?
Oh, no. That was a serious no. Yeah. Like, I wouldn't, like Parag or Shane, like, they wouldn't tell any of us, the panel or the team, that nothing leaks out there, you know. Mammy or Daddy, like, you know, we go to games and we find out the 5 minutes beforehand when the communicator says there's been 2 changes on the Kilkenny team or there's been no changes. That's when we find out. Now, we don't ask either because we know the story. Yeah. You just don't do it. But on the opposite side of that, like when we won the county final with Tullaroan, I remember, you know, we weren't to leak the team, and next minute we came home and Daddy had the team before we got home, you know. And so listen, you win, and this is the thing. People are talking about the Wexford lads going down, you know, not pretend to be injured, but they're taking off their helmets, trying to slow down the game. And, you know, people are saying they shouldn't have done that. They should have tried to go 6 or 7 points up and clear. But it's always dictated by the winners. And if Wexford had the lost and they didn't do that, what would everybody saying? A more experienced team, they would have went down. They would have, you know, went down holding their leg, would have delayed 2 or 3 minutes. Winning dictates everything, Joe.
Galway 219, Cork 121. So 1 point win for Galway. You can take different metrics, but certainly give or take a point or two. There was a sense that Cork left about 3-11 potentially behind them in the first half alone. Kieran Kingston bemoaning just how wasteful they were in this game, and if people didn't catch it, there was always that bubble. Galway always just with their noses in front, and Cork never quite pierce it. So it's hard to know how Cork are to feel about 2022. On the one hand, early on in the Munster round robin, they looked completely open at the back. We discussed it several times. They looked bereft of ideas as to how to fix it. They looked like they were going to exit early, and yet in the end they managed to scuttle their way through, and they only lose a quarter-final by a point. So that puts more of an acceptable sheen on it. But I suppose big picture, if you're talking about All-Ireland finalists last year, it certainly doesn't feel like they're moving forward.
Yeah, and like anyone that asked me before the game last weekend is, what do Cork have to do to win this game? Sort out their defence. And that means from number 15, get in the hooks, get in the blocks, chase it when you don't think you can get back. they did all that the weekend. Galway only scored 2-19. Like, one of the goals is very, lucky. It was a long ball from young Grealish. So really 1-19 in the modern game, that is fair going for any team defensively. The problem with them was, and this hasn't happened in my memory, is they're just totally missed chances, point chances, goal chances, frees, 65s, long range frees, a whole host of different free takers. They hit the post twice. So it was just in front of goal is where they just totally ran out of luck. So I think they'll be, I suppose, encouraged by the fact that defensively they got it right. But unfortunately, in a game of hurling, you have to get both of them right on the same day.
Hard to put your finger on why they have a day like that.
Yeah, because the goal chances, I felt, they were real good goal chances. And it probably comes down to confidence. I think Henry noted in his conference interview after it that all the teams are probably at that stage are probably a little bit shy on confidence. Two of them are after losing a Munster and Leinster final, and two of them are coming from the third place team. So all very shy in confidence. And if you take them, if the Cork boys had brought them in an extra 2 or 3 yards, it was a hand pass over to the other guy into the back of the net, or even for the first chance for Alan Conley, Daithí Burke was after slipping, took it on another 2 or 3 yards, ball, placed it into the back of the net. So I think probably confidence maybe more than that, and could have been their downfall in front of goal. Like Conor Lahan, he's only back from last year. He was dropped last year, back on the team. He's at the, I suppose, the end of his career really at his age. And when he missed a couple of frees, it probably wasn't good for him either. So, and then Mark Coleman went on the frees. He missed a couple, and it was just all over the field. They seemed to be missing chances. It wasn't just down to one individual. But I think Cork will be very disappointed though with this, that they want to go far. They want to be contesting for All-Ireland finals like they were last year, and I think that will be the barometer that they judge themselves on.
Did your confidence fluctuate much?
Sure, it's like every player. Like, I was lucky enough when we were winning, so you might be playing particularly well, but your team was going well, so I have to say I was very lucky that way. Like, to be very much a different scenario if you're on a poorer team, you're not going well, the team is not going well, suddenly you're being highlighted, and when you're going well and winning as a team and you're not playing particularly well, suddenly you come into it in the last 15 minutes, everybody tells you had a great game. So I don't think there's that much difference in players' mentalities at the end of the day.
And if you were going through a period where you weren't playing so well, what was your go-to way to try and play your way out of that?
Training every day, like back to basics. I'd be like a savage, diet and all that would go out the window. No concentration on gym, no concentration on either. Training, that would be my whole focus. From, say, if we were training on Thursday, I'd be like a savage for 2 or 3 days.
Like a savage. What does like a savage mean? Just thinking about it, getting yourself psyched up for 3 days out.
You can just feel it in your belly, Joe. It's hard to describe it. It just grows inside, But like, you're thinking of the player, like you're marking to TJ Reid and Trey, Nolan Larkin. That's all you're thinking about. How are you going to catch the ball over him? How are you going to get in front of him? Maybe hold on to him, get in a block or a diving block. Just anything really, But that's. But listen, when you're playing against great players in training, it's probably that bit easier too.
Yes. But back to basics. That was your route out of a slump.
Back to basics, and you see, it all comes from as a young fella, what you learn and who your idols are. And Willie O'Connor was a great Kilkenny man. He told Bill Hensey, a club man of mine, like he said, he'd rather be hungry than fit. He'd rather be fresh than fit. Yeah. And listen, ideally you want to be both, Joe. But I think,
And would it strike you that it's more difficult for a forward to rediscover their confidence than a defender who can it's a bit easier to go back to basics almost as a defender as opposed to a finesse forward in some respects?
I'd say probably a bit more difficult for an inside forward because you're totally waiting on. You might only get 3 or 4 balls. Like when I was inside in the full forward line with Tollerone, I used to just be telling the other lads, listen, be patient. We'll only get 4 balls in the next half an hour. It doesn't matter how well you're hurling. At least then it kind of built up their mentality that, listen, I'm not going to get worried if a ball comes in and another one doesn't come in for 20 minutes. Towards out the game, I would say no. Shane O'Donnell has proven that. Shane O'Donnell was out of the game last weekend, but he was going around block and hook and putting his body in. This lad coming back from concussion. Lad that was out for 8 or 9 months. He's putting his body on the line. I think when you're in the half-hour line, anywhere, I suppose, other than the full line, you can go where you want. to get yourself into the game. So I would say no, for a half forward, definitely very, very easy. For a full forward, you have to be patient though.
OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.